Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Friday. It is February the 20th. Happy first anniversary to Kash as your first full year as FBI director, and may you spend at least as much time in prison for being a lying sack of garbage. That's not very nice. That is how I feel about it. I woke up this morning and saw a video from Patel celebrating himself for being in the FBI director chair for a year, and he decided to celebrate it by flying to Italy, because he's going to meet with local law enforcement there. Amazing. But also, he's going to watch the hockey finals because he's a hockey guy. And nothing like paying $30,000+ a day for a security detail and maybe $100,000 for flying a plane that's private so you can go watch a hockey game. Did he bring the country music sensation? Will she sing the national anthem if somebody were to win a medal that's an American? Nobody knows. And nobody wants to talk about it. I actually heard that they might be going after FBI employees in the offices with microphones to try to see if anybody is saying anything bad about the guy. So we'll say bad things about him for them. If you're an FBI employee and you happen to be listening in the workspace, be careful. You don't want this audio to get out. So thanks for being there. Here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Abigail Spanberger. She's going to be doing the response to the State of the Union on behalf of the Democrats. What do we think that means? I've got George Hill, who is a military veteran of military intelligence, spent time in our national security apparatus for the NSA and the FBI, and he's also a friend of ours, a suspendable FBI whistleblower who went to Congress. A lot of good it did, but he did point out some bad things. So we're going to have George Hill talk about that, especially the things that I am not so familiar about, the thing called gunboat diplomacy, which is to say, do what we want and come to agreement with us because, by the way, we've got our gunboats sitting off the coast of your little country and we may roast you. A couple other things we're going to get into today. We're going to talk about the Epstein files and something that is an angle that I've never considered before. I had a long conversation yesterday with a retired agent who worked in New York City. And there's some really specific things about the New York FBI and the way that the Epstein files were rolled out and then what it became, and what we're looking at now, and maybe why we don't get the transparency that we should. And I'm going to ping it against George, who has a lot of experience in the intel sphere, because maybe there's some thoughts there. Let's see. I've got questions about the ties between Epstein and Israel, because there are a couple of stories that I didn't do yesterday that I thought were quite interesting. And then lastly, maybe a discussion of the constitutionality and sort of the dangers that a constitutionalist, somebody of principle, looks at the current situation, both Iran, Epstein, all these other sort of things that are swirling around in the public sphere. And it's like, how do you make sense of it from a pragmatic point of view, from an operational morality, in other words, the ends justify the means, and then how does that fit if you're a person who wants to maintain consistent principles as a constitutionalist and say, you know, I actually do want America to live up to the ideals that it meant to sort of espouse to all of us. So that's where we're going to go with today's program, and I hope you guys stick around for it, and we'll have a lively discussion. I like learning things about stuff that I don't know. I taught George that his microphone had a mute button today. George is going to teach us about a bunch of other stuff. Before we get into all that stuff, let's talk about my friends at Patriot Protect. This is probably stuff you guys don't know either. Patriot-protect.com/KYLE. Using my name at checkout will save you 15% on any of the packages they have for your own online security. Here's the deal. Every major company you know is using AI. That's probably not surprising, but whether it be TurboTax or Google or Amazon or Microsoft or Meta or Apple or all your banks or your insurance companies or the hospitals, the credit bureaus, the retailers, the data firms, yeah, all of these things. They say it's about innovation, but what it means is that your personal data is being turned into profit because big corporations are profiting off your inaction, serving you up on a silver platter to cyber criminals and other bad actors, because they almost all get hacked at some point in time. AI runs on data about real people, which means your name and your home address, your phone number, your job, your family, your spending histories, all of these types of things, the information that data brokers and people search websites build, detailed profiles on you. They don't ask your permission. They just do it, and then they put it out on the internet for people to look at. That can make you a very good target. It allows cyber criminals and scammers to go and figure out who's got the thing that they want so they can go do it. Just like the criminals in Home Alone cruising through a neighborhood that looks nice. This is what they're doing here. These profiles are not just feeding corporate AI systems, they're also feeding the scammers all over the country and all over the world. They look up before they attack because they don't want to waste their time either. Now, what can you do? You can get your name removed from this stuff. Patriot Protect has an anti-AI tool available right now that removes you from these systems. Patriot Protect deletes your personal data from Google, removes it from over 240 different data broker websites, people search websites, et cetera, et cetera. The search and destroy protocol keeps on monitoring and wiping out new exposures automatically. That's what your subscription does. It's like less than $100 a year on their basic stuff. This is what we're using right now. Guys, use our link below in the show description. Use my name at checkout for 15% off. It's the one that I'm using. My folks are using it. I'm pretty sure George Hill is actually using it as well. More on that in just a minute, but check out Patriot Protect. They're sponsoring this program. We really appreciate our sponsors that stick with us and are helping us do what we do. And let's get into today's program starting now. All right, no further ado. Here's the man, the myth. How we doing, George Hill? You look like you're standing in a place that is getting renovated.
Yeah, I actually finished the last bit of it yesterday, and other than some cleaning to do, we're 100% full mission capable.
Did you or did you not just breathe in like 40-year-old human skin cells and tissue that was in your carpet?
Yeah, normally I would never have put down carpet, but my realtor recommended that I carpet the second floor of the house, and that carpeting was about 45 years old. And I should have went out and got an N95 mask, but instead I decided to filter it all through my lungs while it was being pulled up. So bad move on my part.
I think you also sent me a text message while you were sitting, and you said, I'm sitting on my couch. There's a bunch of like non-English speaking, non-bacon cheeseburger nationalists chilling in my home, tearing up carpet, and I'm sitting here armed, waiting to like off somebody for stealing my stuff. Did I paraphrase a little bit?
Oh, you got it right. And I actually made it a multiple choice question. Am I paranoid? Am I prepared? Or am I just living in bacon cheeseburger America?
I think you could be all three at the same time. I think a bacon cheeseburger nationalist might be paranoid at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, why not? I mean, they had to use Google Translate for every interaction with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, indeed.
Because no hablo.
Nobody, freaking the oblos, man. Can we start off with your favorite thing in the world? Women in politics who used to work for the CIA?
Man, boy, did they sneak her in, right? I'm loving it. I mean, I know that it's not a very Christian characteristic of Schadenfreude, which is the German word for taking pleasure in someone else's misfortune. But I am just basking in Schadenfreude right now.
What do you like about
it? Funny because they voted for her because they were all upset, meaning Nova, Northern Virginia.
Yes.
They put her in office. And none of the Doge cuts that Doge recommended have been codified by Congress. So nothing's changed. And they got Abigail Spanberger, who is doubling their taxes and taking away their firearms. I'm just loving every minute of it, to quote Loverboy.
All right, let's read the story here. This is coming from ABC News. Who is Abigail Spanberger, the Virginia governor who's going to deliver the Democratic response to Trump's State of the Union address? It's a high-profile speaking slot given to those considered rising stars. Also, sometimes people who end up failing dramatically. Didn't they have Stacey Abrams in that spot at one point?
Stacey Abrams?
Wasn't she the one with the teeth that are spread so far apart you could kick a field goal through them?
Yeah, she was Georgia, though, right?
Yeah, but didn't she do the State of the Union rebuttal at one point? I feel like she did.
Whew.
We'll have to look back. Somebody in the chat will double check me on this one. All right, so Abigail Spanberger is now the governor of Virginia. She also hired Stanley Meador to be her Homeland Security and Public Safety, whatever, secretary. So that's cool. She's going to deliver the Democratic response to President Trump's address next week. They got House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer announced yesterday that Spanberger will speak after Trump on Tuesday night. Everybody's and they're going to have Alex Padilla do a Spanish language response. Have they done that one before that you're aware of?
No, as Alex Padilla, was he the one that got tackled by ICE?
He is the one that got tackled by ICE. Apparently, he's going to do the Spanish language response so that the guys who are not American citizens that are not allowed to vote, that we're fixing your carpet situation, so those guys can actually also know what Democrats have to say about the answer to Donald Trump.
Now, is he going to do that face down on the floor with an agent with a knee in his back, or is he going to do it standing up?
It's a great question, and I think it's going to be a game time decision. I'm not 100% sure that they've made that call yet. I think they'll just see if anybody shows up and tackles him. Here's what Spanberger had to say about her choice. Quote, "We are at a defining moment in our nation's history. Virginians and Americans across the country are contending with Rising costs. That's pretty funny because I've been seeing some stuff about the tripling of the cost of electricity in Northern Virginia. They have a thing called Dominion Power, and there's all these videos of people talking about, hey, I used to pay like $200-300 a month for my power bill, and now it's like $1,500 or it's $980, which is wild. There's chaos in their communities. There's real fear of what each day may bring. Obviously, this is all Donald Trump's fault. Next week, I look forward to laying out what these Americans can expect and what they deserve, and leaders who are working hard to deliver for them. Tell me about Abigail Spanberger. Do you know what she did in the CIA? Do you actually know what her background there was?
I believe she was an operations officer, but what her CV consists of in terms of duty stations and anything that she can claim credit for, as a,
what does an
career
operations officer
accomplishment, I don't
do?
know.
So they're saying here, before she entered politics, she's a mother of three. She was an officer for the CIA working undercover and overseas nebulously. What's an ops officer
so
do?
she would have been an operations officer. They don't call them agents or spies, but they recruit sources or access agents and basically go out and collect intelligence using human beings to do that. That doesn't mean that they might not use electronic means to do it, but primarily their goal is to collect intelligence in the countries that they're in. And even the countries that they're in may have people that have access to information that are threats emanating from other countries where she may not have been stationed. For example, say you're operating in sub-Saharan Africa and you want information on the Wagner group, the Wagner group. And, so you could be working in sub-Saharan Africa as an operations officer, actually doing work in regards to Russia collection requirements.
What you said access officer or what did you say? Access agents. Can you define that? Because I feel like that's going to come up later when we start talking about Epstein things.
Yeah, that's an in-between. So that's not actually the person who goes out and gets the information. So the operations officer is not getting the information. They're not doing, breaking in the dark of night. They do have people who do that, but that's not their primary role. An access agent would be someone that you recruit in a country that knows somebody who actually does have access to the information that you're trying to obtain. They may be referred to euphemistically as a cutout. But that's the person that you're going to be working with. And a lot of times that access agent is a person that is operating within the organization that you're seeking to penetrate. And then they know somebody else within that organization who can get it. So trying to think of like an FBI example, like Kyle Seraphin might be an access agent to get in touch with somebody who's still working for the FBI, but I'm not working directly with that special agent at the New York field office.
Yeah, that checks out. So somebody wants to know something that's going on. One of our listeners may send me something. Hey, how do I find this kind of person? I go, oh, well, we need to find you somebody who's a white collar supervisor in fill in the blank field office. Let me see if I can call and reach out and get somebody. I can find that. I put them in touch. I'm like a broker. Yeah, I'm a middleman making some connections.
Right, and it actually does serve to protect everyone. It protects the operations officer. It protects the person actually doing the collection. There's a degree of deniability for the access agent. There may be some degradation of the intelligence coming back to you, but it's a safe way to operate.
Is access agent kind of a synonymous term for co-optee, which we hear some of the times used in the Chinese space, or is that slightly different?
No, co-optee is usually someone who's generally has been compromised. Now, you can compromise an access agent.
Right.
So then they would be both.
Got it. But it's not necessarily. It's
doesn't have to be, no.
Okay. All right. She's talking about chaos in the streets, George. She's talking about some of these things that they want to address. It seems to me that this is all fixated on sort of the ICE situation and the way that they're framing it for, I don't know, average Americans, something to that effect. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah. Oddly enough, they've decided to hang their hat on an issue that is polling very favorably with the American public across both parties, and to include independents.
It seems like it splits because people agree with the idea of deportations. They definitely don't want people here that came here illegally. And so they're on board with this one idea that's like, okay, we've got to get these people out of here. There's all kinds of, fixed costs. There's all kinds of downstream costs of having them. And then yet it looks like the left won a narrative battle when it comes to talking about ICE tactics. That's kind of where they've been hanging their hat. This is the quote unquote chaos in the streets. We're not saying you shouldn't do this thing. We're just really mad about the way that you're doing it. Am I reading that more or less correct, you think?
No, 100%. They sent the wrong guy to Minnesota to run that operation. What was the guy that just got relieved?
It was Bavino.
Yeah, Bavino. And he's a border guy. So they operate very differently than ICE agents. So they sent and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, but they sent the wrong tool to do the job.
Mm-hmm. No, there's always you can accomplish the same mission with multiple different ways. Just using the right tool usually gets a better outcome with less collateral frustration, whatever that may be. So the story I'm quoting here, folks, if you're just listening to us and you can't see the headline on the screen, Americans oppose tactics used by ICE and their enforcement by about a 2-to-1 margin, according to some polls. Over half of Americans are angry or upset because it seems like Republicans lost the narrative victory here when they had what was going on. And again, I think the numbers that I'm seeing as well say that, yeah, people do want to get these folks out. They're down with that. There's a lot of reasons why. I'm going to play you a clip from Peter Navarro, which is actually, it's funny to me because he's saying something that makes perfect sense. And it's the reason why yesterday's rant about the fact that shutting down the border was the tourniquet, but the surgical intervention of getting rid of like all the people that are here, they haven't done it. And so you can't claim a victory when they're the real problem. Anyway, the idea is the Democrats are going to fixate on, it's not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. It's not, I don't mind what you're saying, but I don't like the way you've said it to me kind of thing. It's a very feminine sort of perspective if you go on the masculine and feminine in politics. It's all about feelings. It's like, you're being meanies. Could you be less meanies when you get rid of the people that are breaking the law in our country, please? What do you think?
Yeah, well, then we have meetings to determine when we're going to have the next meeting. I mean, you can't.
Meanies. I said meanies. You're a mean person.
Look, every time I went in for a performance review, my supervisor told me that I was terse. And I said to him every time, like, you throw that out like it's a bad thing.
Terse?
Yeah, terse just means direct and to the point. And there's a large segment of this population that do not like terse. They'd much rather talk for 20 minutes to get a 2-minute point across.
This actually goes back to the first time that I met George, which was we first came in contact. I was sitting in a hotel room, having just met with one of James O'Keefe's donors in San Diego, and I got your message, and it was something to the effect of, "I worked in Boston. You know how to vet that. If you'd like to get in contact, use your sources, and here's how to reach me," or something like that.
No, that's exactly it. Yeah,
it was very terse, but it's effective for people that understand. It's like, look, don't butter me up. Just tell me what you want. Tell me, and then I'll decide whether or not I can do it.
That's 26 years of in uniform. We don't have a lot of time to hold hands and explain things, and sing a song beforehand and, pass the talking stick around. This is what the mission is. This is who's involved. This is how we're going to do it. This is the desired outcome. Any questions? Good. I didn't think so. Move out.
So, George, there's a great line in the Robert Redford movie Spy Game, where at one point he looks over, and I can't remember who he's saying it to, but he says, "Are you going to dance all night with your hand on my ass? You're going to make your move." That's George Hill summed up in the way that I've dealt with it. It's just good. Okay, can I play you this Peter Navarro clip because I think it's kind of interesting? This is both simultaneously saying things that I think are true, and then also pointing out the screw up, and this is why the Trump administration is going to have a problem. I keep seeing in the midterms, it's the overpromise, underdeliver issue. Listen to this and then tell me if you see the glaring error I do.
Here's the statistic I want every American to understand. 1% increase in rents for every 1 million illegals that cross our border. In the 4 years of Biden, we had 20 million. So rents went up nationally 20% because Joe Biden left that border open. And it was worse because that's the national number. If you go into the blue sanctuary cities,
that's
the
right,
New Yorks and the Chicagos and places where they're electing crazy guys like Mondami trying to capitalize on that, they were even higher. So what we're seeing, and it's a beautiful thing, but it takes time, what we're seeing now is if we deported thousands upon thousands upon thousands of illegal aliens already, we're seeing rents go down dramatically in a lot of cities across America.
You see any hole in that?
Yeah, those numbers don't add up. If he said it's a 1% decline in rent costs for every 1 million illegals,
right? And we took on 20. We took on 20.
Right. 20, 30. Some people say even bigger. And then you have the problem of birthright citizenship that still hasn't been addressed yet. So you talk about flow rate. So the flow rate going out of that pipe is not going to do the job. You know, you've got an 8-inch pipe with a 16th inch, flow going out of it. It's not going to fix the problem. But the interviewer let him get away with it.
Right. That always seems to be the issue. It's like, you just told me that millions came in. For every million, we're going to get a 1% increase in rent. And we have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people coming out. That's a fraction of a million. And then you're saying that there's significant declines in rent. Those significant declines are going to be measured in fractions of a percent from everything I could just tell from the numbers.
Right. Well, at the same time, you've got inflation that's driving up cost as well. And you have places like in New York City where they're looking at they're going to raise property taxes. They're going to raise property taxes in Virginia.
Same thing. Right? Anybody who wants to do stuff with other people's money needs other people's money.
Yeah. So that pipe is backing up. It's not flowing out. It's backing up. Kind of like that sewage pipe in Maryland and Virginia and DC that's overflowing and backing up, It
always smells like poop on the Potomac because the Anacostia is right there. And I'm confident they drop raw sewage into the Anacostia. Right? I mean,
yeah, it's gross.
I used to drive over the bridge going in to go work in Southeast DC, and I'd get on the radio with my surveillance team because we'd be there at like 4 a.m. and have the windows down, and it would feel nice to just feel like the night air on me. It makes you feel like a predator for whatever it's worth. Like when you're going in to the battle zone, you're going out to hunt, you want to smell the air, you want to feel it around you. So I'd always have windows down when I was cruising in. I didn't listen to radio, just heard what my guys were saying on my earpiece and like whatever was coming out of the squawk box there, and I'm cruising in. And then I would hit that that air mass that smelled like human shit that would just come out of the river. And I'd be like, I love the smell of Southeast DC in the morning because it was always the same. It smelled like people directly crapped into the river. So anyway, that's nothing.
Yeah, and the temperatures are still cold. What's that going to smell like for the July 4th celebration?
It's so gross. It's so gross. Like when people talk about the swamp, they forget that there's a smell to the swamp, and the smell is human feces and raw sewage, untreated butthole products just dropping into the water so you can walk by it with your kids with your stroller and be like, America's so great. We're basically like India right now. Anyway, that's hellish. I'm looking over here at the Agenda 47, George. I can't help but keep referring to this stuff. Actually, someone made a scorecard the other day. One of our listeners over on X did this, and it was kind of great. But he made a scorecard. It's like, seal the border, stop the migrant invasion, A. Number 2, carry out the largest deportation operation in American history, D-. That's where that Peter Navarro thing really bothers me. And then all the upstream costs that go along with it. The other thing, ending inflation, make America affordable, and the Doge thing, the fact that we walked away from, like, why is no one talking about, am I crazy? Is no one else talking about this stuff? It's like, where did the chainsaw go? I thought we were going to cut down all the waste. I thought we were cutting waste.
No, we haven't. I mean, the Department of Education, last time I checked, is still in business. The only organization I think that lost federal funding was NPR.
Oh,
that's it.
It's kind of not a federal organization.
No, it's not a federal organization. I'm just saying they lost federal funding.
Right. So we're not in great shape. The other thing is this Make America Healthy sort of piece. And give me 1 second here. I'm off camera while I'm grabbing a piece here on Social Security. This is the other thing that I keep seeing talks about right now. So there's this discussion about Social Security. And again, cutting fraud is how you make things solvent. There's a huge amount of Social Security fraud. Like basically every program, I think, has a huge amount of fraud. I don't know how you wouldn't have it. This is Lutnick. This may end up getting us to our segue at the end towards Epstein stuff. But here he is talking about they want to change up and not take any money. Basically, Social Security is insolvent, and I guess it's faster than they thought. Apparently, people didn't realize that we're in 2026, which means 2030 is like right around the corner. So let's just look at this real quick as we talk about government in general, and I'll get your take on the efficiencies of sending money to the government to give you money later.
The key is stop sending money to the wrong place, so we can make sure we can always defend sending money to the right place. I would never allow, if I can stand it, to not pay somebody who retired at 65 their benefits.
Yeah,
I find it disgusting when we're the richest country in the world and some politician says, in order to save Social Security, rather than getting rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse, we should move it to 70.
Yeah.
How about no? How about we're rich enough to give people the benefit of the bargain of being a great American, but let's put great people in charge.
That's really well said.
Yeah, if we could just get great people in charge, it would all be fine. Except we put this like billionaire kind of wonky autistic guy with a chainsaw to get it in charge, and then it didn't work. So I'm going to play this, and then we'll come back to George real quick.
A potential Social Security shakeup could impact your road to retirement. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office is projecting that the main Social Security trust fund is expected to run dry in 2032. The CBO saying retirees could see their monthly checks reduced in just 6 years' time. And here to help make sense of all this in this economy, we have Alex Jaquez. He's a chief policy and advocacy at Groundwork Collaborative. Alex, thank you so much for the time. But I want to start with the question that's on so many Americans' minds right now. How did we get here?
It's a great question, Alex, and thanks for having me. The Social Security Trust Fund is funded by payroll taxes. They're the taxes that we pay on every paycheck. It is not funded out of the general revenue like the rest of the economy, basically. And so we can't run a deficit, which means that when the Social Security Trust Fund runs dry, which again is 1 year earlier in 2032 than was projected last year, according to the CBO report, on the budget and outlook that comes out every year, then payments have to be curtailed. And so that'll be an immediate 7% payment cut in 2032, and then an average 28% benefit drop from 2033 onward. And basically, the issue is that more people are getting older and retiring than people who are coming in and working. And so that is a lopsided issue with the Social Security Trust Fund that we have seen coming for decades and policymakers have yet to address.
Well, and
How many calluses do you think are on that man's hands, George?
It's a family-friendly program. I'm going to keep it at 0. I was thinking of something else.
I have a friend. He's a buddy of mine. He's a special operator, and his dad's an anesthesiologist. He's probably listening to this right now. And he described the way that he would describe that young man who looked really beefy. So if you guys were listening, the voice and the visual are so incompatible. That guy looks like he's about 250. He's got some big stacked shoulders. He's got that soft, nice voice. The doc would call him musical.
Yeah.
He would say, I got a nephew. He's Kyle. He's musical. I go, he's what? He's like, yeah, he's kind of a musical young man.
Yeah. My term would be delicate flower.
So gentle. It's almost like we could never imagine that Social Security was going to be bankrupt. I feel like I've been hearing that since I was 9 years old. Is that?
Every discussion about Social Security is the laser dot that the cat is chasing. Mm-hmm. There is no trust fund. It was eliminated under President Nixon way back when, before probably most of your audience was born, or at least half of them. So all the discussions start with a lie that there's a Social Security trust fund, that there's a lockbox. It's part of the general fund. So it's all just an accounting gimmick where they just keep the ledger as if it were a trust fund. So it's irrelevant.
We ran a piece on this maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. I'm remembering back. And something like when we talk about the national debt, a huge chunk of it is the federal government owes money back to Social Security because it's been borrowing from it. Yes, what are you?
Yeah, they owe it to us.
They owe it to us. Yeah, the national debt is actually government programs that were not meant to be touched, but they went after the money because it was available, and they wrote a bunch of IOUs, and now they're like, by the way, we ran out of the IOUs. We can't actually pay you the shit that we said. You're a retiree right now, yes?
Yes.
Do you get Social Security?
I do. I've been banking as much of it as I can in anticipation that it's going to go away. What my concern is that.
Did you know that when you were preparing for retirement? Like, how far back did you think, like, I might never get the whole benefit here?
Oh, probably 15, 20 years ago, I saw this train come. My undergraduate degree is in finance. You don't have to be a financial genius to do basic, ninth grade level math to know that this doesn't add up.
If I take $2 For every $1.50 that you put into the pot, there's $68 in there right now. How long will it take till there's no more money?
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. It's but this financial choo-choo train is about ready to leave the tracks. Most of the wheels are already off of it. Peter Zion, who is a well-paid consultant, started out with Stratfor, has his own consulting business now. He said that basically the only way out of this for the Western democracies, because this is happening all across the Western democracies, these social programs are now untenable, is a complete reset, which is to liquidate all debts, all assets, and start with something else. And what that something else is, he doesn't know. And he's a lot smarter than me, whether you agree with him or not.
George, I'm going to call the audience attention to two things that make sense in the context of what you just said. Thing number one is there's a sword on the wall behind you, and then on either side of your head are candlesticks. And what I just heard is that when this reset happens, whatever it looks like, George will be fighting people trying to take his stuff by candlelight with a sword, even if he runs out of all other options.
Yeah, in this house cleaning yesterday, the new carpeting, I didn't even know I had. I found 1,000 rounds of 5.56 yesterday. I didn't even know I had.
Oh, that's a score. That's like a $500 score.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Yeah.
It'll make up for that lack of Social Security check that's going to get cut by 28%.
It's not. I don't think I'm going to see any more of it. It's at some point in time. It's this. Like I said, this choo-choo train just hasn't left the tracks yet, but most of the wheels are off.
It does seem like that. Anyway, the number, it's just this funny math game. And again, nobody wants to go out there and change it is the problem that I always see. It's like everybody talks big. We're going to make America affordable. The best way you make America affordable is stop paying for an administration, and by this I mean Social Security Administration, that's defrauded on a regular basis, is the least efficient way for me to keep my own money. And maybe, like trust Americans to be in a quote unquote free country and have agency where I manage my own dollars. The worst, like if you were like, hey, who would you like to manage your assets? You, a family member, someone that you pay, that you trust, or some random low IQ government employee that's a long ways away that is busy painting her freaking nails because I know exactly what she looks like. She's too busy to answer the phone when you call. And Tanya is hanging out there in the nail room, not doing the work that she's paid to do. And by the way, if she does actually do it, you better kiss her ass so much for just showing up to work, for her to actually maybe even answer your questions. And by the way, she doesn't know what she's supposed to know. So anyway, so there's that. I hate the Social Security Administration. I've hated it since I was a kid.
Chile, not exactly an economic superpower, privatized their Social Security system. And last I heard, it's doing quite well.
It makes sense. I hate that. All right, let me plug the program. Guys, if you're listening right now and we're about to get into some analysis you probably won't hear anywhere else, give us a like over on Rumble. We appreciate that. Bump us on the leaderboard for at least tomorrow's rankings. Same thing over on YouTube. You can give us a like there. We appreciate that. If you have not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to both. You never know when one of these systems or programs is going to just fail, like Social Security, and go down. That's a real possibility. If you're watching on X, congratulations. You found us. I don't know how you did that. A lot of people that are looking for us on X cannot find us anymore, and so join us on one of the platforms that work best. And if you guys want to be able to see the video and the audio and get the best experience, Apple, iHeart, they're all inferior to Spotify at this point, who host the program. KyleSerafinshow.com is the website you can go to. You don't even have to download the app, but if you do download the app, it's free, number one. There's no subscription cost, number two. It's paid for by a couple of ads, one of which you may hear right now. And I think it's a superior way to get it. You get chapters, you get all kinds of like AI transcripts and stuff. So subscribe over there as well. Make sure you like this program wherever you can get to. Leave us a comment if you like on Spotify, on YouTube, or on Rumble. And share the program with someone that you love, or maybe someone that you want to frustrate, because George Hill and I have kind of a habit of playing in that little game. Let's talk about gunboat diplomacy. Do you recall, George, there was this discussion about something called a DonRoe Doctrine?
Yeah, it's kind of gross.
What the hell is the DonRoe Doctrine? There's Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, I mean, you have to start out with the Monroe Doctrine, which was to keep European powers out of the Americas. Mm-hmm. And the DonRoe Doctrine has become sort of a perverse extension of that, going out on a global scale, enforcing America's will in various parts of the world. Now, there is an argument to be made for some of those moves, but I don't know. I just find the deification of a human being rather offensive.
What was the original? So it kind of evolved. It went from Monroe Doctrine. Then we ended up kind of having this this sort of walk softly, carry a big stick. This is our puddle, and stay the hell out of
Great
it.
White
This is
Fleet. Yep.
And then all of those are sort of like they're kind of empire, are they not? Are they discussing basically American empire sphere of influence, but kind of limiting it to within our time zones kind of deal, within our hemisphere? Was that not the original intent?
The Monroe Doctrine, yes. The Monroe Doctrine was.
Okay.
The DonRoe Doctrine is a little bit more complex.
But it's two steps away, because before, I mean, James Monroe, obviously very early on, then we sort of had this idea that we were going to control the puddle, Caribbean's ours, anything in the Gulf of Mexico that touches it, that's all our business. If you're on either side of our shorelines, like you're in our space. That was the Great White Fleet. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Right. That's the fleet that Teddy Roosevelt built. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the USS Olympia, coal-powered battleship of the day, still berthed in Philadelphia.
That's cool. I don't hate that. And then we've kind of grown into this idea where it's like America can project any power anywhere as long as we're able to do so, and therefore you have to listen to us. That's what DonRoe is, or am I simplifying?
That's a part of it, yes. But the very foundation for the DonRoe Doctrine is, and he's never explained it to anyone, is that the Americas, because this actually ties into what's going on with Canada right now. The Americas, so basically from the Arctic Circle to the Antarctic, have all of the resources necessary for long-term economic growth, whether we're talking minerals, timber, agriculture, rare earth minerals, oil, all of it, and to include a good population demographic and growth.
Okay.
And so what he is trying to do, and has failed to explain to the American public, is to secure the American hemisphere for the benefit of the United States. Now, that's a policy that's not been articulated, and one can either agree with it or not agree with it. I respect, either side, willing to listen to an argument, but that's essentially what is going on here. So what's going on with Iran, if I can segue into that.
Well, let me just hit real quick, because we're about to. I want to just hit this thing, because apparently this is the story that Donald Trump reads first every morning. He goes to Axios. We had a little private chat in our Suspendables group that I think he goes to Axios because every story promises to be roughly a 1-minute read, which is kind of funny. But there's a discussion about war powers and a vote on war powers. So I want to talk about the constitutionality of it, and then we'll easily segue into Iran. There's a question on whether or not they're going to give away war powers, whether they're going to require, they're asking for a resolution that says that Donald Trump should ask for war powers to go in Iran, which is kind of my problem with this. I don't hate the idea of us going to war ever, as long as the people's representatives are represented there. And we haven't done that in 40, 50 years. That's just not the way the American system works anymore. World War II. So that was the last time that we actually had treason. For everybody that wanted to know about a treason case, we actually had a declared enemy under, Congress came forward with a declaration of war. So, all right, all of that is to say we've got the USS Gerald Ford rolling in, the largest aircraft carrier entering the Mediterranean. It's the gunboat diplomacy game. We're off the coast. This is your shine. Go for it.
So as far as the constitutionality goes in the War Powers Act, you've heard it, you're going to hear it first here. This is something that needs to be addressed from maybe looking at the possibility of a constitutional amendment, because the weapon systems have changed dramatically. Like the 12-mile limit was based on cannon fire coming out of a black powder cannon. Armies up until about the beginning of the 20th century were not necessarily standing armies. Now we have, for over 100 years almost now, the entire world with loaded weapons with fingers on trigger that can create massive destruction. Mm-hmm. So to have a debate in Congress in order to be able to act quickly to head off a looming threat is a discussion worth having, whether or not we need to amend the Constitution. But the problem is that we were experiencing is that we've had presidents, both Republican and Democrat, who use the authorized use of military force, which has been reauthorized, I think, every time it's come up, and using that in a more willy-nilly fashion for foreign policy, as opposed to foreign policy that's not necessarily directly connected to national defense. And that's where we get into problems.
Can you give me an example of not using it, like using that particular power, but not for national defense? Most recent ones you can think of?
Sure. Kuwait, Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. The Navy intel officer who was teaching my course when I was transitioning, bad word, from Marine Corps to Navy.
Look what they've taken from us, George.
Intel. And I'm sure he won't matter. He probably doesn't even listen to this, but his name was Jebich, and last name. And when Iraq invaded Kuwait, they had a discussion in the S2 shop, whether or not they were even going to brief the admiral of the fleet, whether it was worthy of briefing or not. But it was George Bush 41 that decided that it was a threat to national security. But they did brief it to the admiral, but not with a lot of fanfare. Kuwait, for a lot of the things that Saddam Hussein said about Kuwait were 100% correct. So one could make a pretty good argument that going in to save Kuwait, whack Iraq won, was not necessarily in our national interest. So that was authorized use of military force for political reasons.
When you look at the American history of regime change as a guy who's spent time in intel and helped give information that can be used for that sort of thing, that can justify those positions if somebody wants to so brief it. Do we have a really good history when it comes to doing regime change? Are there any good, really good shining successes where we nailed it on this one?
No, not recently. I mean,
I'm trying to steel man the argument.
Well, back to Chile, you had that regime change there. You had all sorts of CIA operations going on in Central and South America in the 50s and the 60s, because we were hyper fixated on the Soviet Union and its expansionist desires. More recently, we had regime changes in Ukraine with the Orange Revolution. I mean, by and large,
can anybody point and go you know what, this one was it? This is what we're trying to accomplish. Here's an example of us doing a great job. We always make fun of communists, right? Because the communist thing is well, where has it been tried that it worked? And they're like, well, it's never really been tried. That's a terrible argument. That's why it falls. Right. Is there an argument for hey, listen, regime can work in our favor, and here's the example of what we're trying to accomplish, even if we haven't done it all the time?
Anybody who's ever been canoeing knows that when, if you're not experienced canoeer, the first person in that canoe makes it unstable. It's rocking left and right. And the more they try to stabilize the canoe, they wind up flipping it over. That's regime change. Okay. Anytime you destabilize a region or take out a regime, you usually wind up flipping the canoe.
That's not really the goal of being in a canoe generally.
No. The idea is to stay dry, have a good time, take some pictures, maybe have a sandwich or go fishing.
I'm down for all those things. Yeah. All right. So, okay. At least I'm not missing some salient example where the Lindsey Graham types, the Mark Levin types, the people that seem to have this wargasm attitude, and you're no shrinking violet when it comes to violence or nation state violence or the use of force when necessary, I would imagine. But I'm not seeing where the great argument is look how great we've done it in the past.
Well, you got two lawyers with, arguing for war, Lindsey Graham and Mark Levin, two lawyers who, I believe Lindsey Graham was a JAG officer, JAGOff for short.
He was definitely a JAGOff.
Yeah. And, but he was in the Air Force. So at least he did suit up, but not exactly, outside the wire kind of guy.
He looks like I'd like to parachute him. I still keep saying this. It's one of my most favored tweets that people really enjoy over on X. I was like, can we just parachute these boomer doughy assholes into Tehran? They want it so bad. Let's let them do it. Let them start their own war. I think it would actually let a lot of frustration out for a lot of Americans, just candidly.
Well, as a GWAT veteran and a Cold War veteran, I still have a lot of friends from both those lives that I lived. Us GWAT vets are not chomping at the bit to go and, get stabbed in the back again. I mean, Afghanistan and the evacuation out of Bagram kind of sealed the deal on that one.
Yeah, that checks. Especially when there seems like it's just a failure on so many domestic priorities. So what is the argument in favor of intervention in Iran? Because there's got to be some
intervention
from your end
in Iran. is it in our national interest? The only argument that I can make for taking out, and put it this way, you have to go for regime change in Iran. We can play whack-a-mole forever from now until Christ comes again, of going after their missile program or their nuclear program. They're going to continue to rebuild it every time we knock it over. So the only reason to go into Iran is for regime change. And we just covered that. That doesn't usually work out very well. We can't really point to a shining example of that where it's worked as intended. The only thing I can come up with for a regime change in Iran is that it cuts China off at the knees. So this is more of an attack on China than it is on Iran. Yes, it benefits Netanyahu and the Israelis by taking the Iranians off the board. I have no love for the Iranians. I've had, a problem with them since they took our embassy in 1979. But I am concerned about China. And it's kind of like we were talking about an access agent. If you want to hurt China, take out Iran.
So you can do it as a proxy. We don't have a real great history on proxy wars that I recall either. Well,
it's not a proxy war. It's not a proxy war. It's taking out a key element to China's economy.
Okay.
They produce no oil. They import 100% of their oil. And we're heavily sanctioning Russia. The Ukrainians have dramatically reduced Russian crude oil production, versus where China got most of its oil from. They have been up in the last few years, been getting it almost exclusively from Iran, going around sanctions. So this is a strike on Iran, but make no mistake about it, this is about China and cutting them off at the knees, because it also takes China out of our hemisphere. The first step of taking China out of the hemisphere was taking out Maduro. The second step is taking out the regime in Iran.
What did you think about
China? This is about global supremacy.
Let's pivot on that just for a second. What did you think about the Maduro, kidnap, extradition, whatever they want to call that?
That was fun to watch.
Duck on it, damn it.
So, Maduro was massing troops on Guinea, not the African continent of Guinea, but the one just a little bit to the east of Venezuela, where the largest known reserves of crude oil exist and are just starting to be exploited.
Okay.
So Maduro made a claim in international court that country was actually part of Venezuela. The UN and the international court gave him 2 thumbs down on that. And he's like, well, screw it. I'll just go take it. And so those are making the argument that Maduro was about oil. They're 100% right.
But maybe not the right oil that they were talking about.
Yes.
People are
they're thinking Venezuelan oil. It was about Guinea oil, or Guyana oil, not Venezuelan oil. And, look, the windmills and the solar panels aren't getting it done. We just talked about electric rates, 20 minutes ago. So, look, the world runs on fossil fuels. I'm sorry, climate pagans, that's not going to change. Not in my lifetime.
No, it's not. What do you think about the sort of the constitutionality of it, the outsourcing of this authority going to Congress? I think, and I don't know what your position is. That's been my issue with it. I kind of with you with it's cool to watch our technology go and do some surgical stuff where, helicopters coming in the sky, super well-trained, hyper-functional, freakish athlete men that just want to go and they have sharp teeth and they have sharp claws and they want to go and use them. I think it's cool too, because I know some of those guys and I know that that's what they suit up for every morning when they're training in the gym. But also at the same time, I'm kind of like, what does that do for the principles that this country is supposed to work off?
So it's a two-edged sword there. We're staying with Venezuela. There was plenty of time to go in front of Congress. We saw those troops amassing for almost a year, a shift of resources from Venezuela towards their eastern border with Guyana. There was plenty of time to go to Congress. The difference is that by doing it the way he did, he meaning Trump, is that we didn't have to mobilize a bunch of reservists and National Guard troops with a full declaration of war and go in heavy. We were able to go in and surgically remove him out of the picture. So it was a lot cleaner in that regard. But what we're left with is a woman who is more of a staunch communist than Maduro, the former bus driver, was, and is probably a little bit more intellectually Yeah, the other communist, not that communist. But
I know,
yeah, so
just...
now we're left with another communist running Venezuela.
I wonder if the answer is like modifications of what we think about, because the declaration of war is really kind of an old thought. If we're evolving the doctrines of U.S. intervention, foreign policy wise, it doesn't make sense to evolve like what a declaration of war is and authorizes and looks like, which Congress could write it up any way they want. The powers don't specifically say in the Constitution. What is it? It's like Article 1. Is it 1.8? Is that what it is? I'll have to look it up again.
I don't remember, but they like to use this, though. They use it as a cudgel. Both sides use it as a cudgel to beat the other over the head. It's okay when Barack Obama, kills American citizens overseas, but it's not okay for the Republicans when Donald Trump does something overseas. So they like to just use it as a cudgel to beat each other over the head with. And quite frankly, it doesn't serve anybody, and it's rather tiresome.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, but that goes to the point of nothing gets done, and we just our entire thing is the theatrical argument about it. Like nobody ends up anywhere, except we've spent more Social Security, and apparently Social Security is going to go bankrupt one way or another.
Right. I mean,
that's the other game, right? It's everybody's fault that Social Security sucks.
Terse. This is the opposite of terse. This is just drama and theater, and it's rather tiresome.
What is your prediction from where we're sitting right now? The probability of outcomes over the next couple of weeks as these things, Olympics end, and there's this story that's going on right now from CBS. I'll pull it up real quick just for grins. It says that Iran dangles investment proposals off ramp to Trump's gunboat diplomacy. 2 rounds of indirect talks between the United States and Iran have produced unique proposals addressing Iran's nuclear program. So apparently we're back to talking about whether that's the issue. It doesn't sound like it is. Enrichment capabilities and their highly enriched uranium supplies that they already have, trying to make a deal that would be economically beneficial to both countries. Everybody gets the win-win kind of thing. Tehran seeks sanctions relief, says this diplomat. The Americans may be willing to... They said they'd be willing to purchase American aircraft and give us access to oil and gas fields and joint investment opportunities. Where do you think this thing kind of goes? If that's the potential off ramp?
Yeah, that's fascinating, right? They're playing to Trump's ego and they're playing to his pocketbook. Two things that he responds well to. It'd be interesting to see if he takes the bait. Look, asking the Iranians to turn their back on their nuclear program and their missile program is like asking the Vatican to turn its back on Christianity. I mean, this is what we're talking about here. They're not going to do it because they can't do it.
That has to be sort of the cornerstone of what their regime is about, because it puts them on the world stage, which they want to be like a
Well, it's not about
player.
geopolitics. It's about religion. People need to understand that. This is about bringing the 12th imam who was hidden in a well from the Sunnis. This is what they believe. Okay. Whether we think it's silly or not is irrelevant. They believe it, and they want to bring about God's kingdom on earth as they see it in the Quran. And you're asking them to turn their back on their religion. And there is no geopolitical solution to the Iranian issue. There's not. As long as they are a theocracy and remain a theocracy, there is no negotiated solution with Iran. So how this is going to play out is if you're threatening someone to a gunfight, you better bring a gun to that fight. And the United States has brought a lot of guns to this fight. We just pulled out of a NATO exercise to pull our F-35s into the theater. This just happened this morning.
Right.
And the media is talking about the Gerald R. Ford. The George H.W. Bush has already snuck into theater already. There are people, they're kind of like train spotters that have spotted a flat top going through Gibraltar yesterday. Well,
what's a flat top?
Gerald R. Ford is just transiting the Gibraltar this morning, the Straits of Gibraltar. So there are 3 carriers in the region right now. One operating in the Indian Ocean, just off the Straits of Hormuz, because you can't put a carrier in the Gulf. It's too small of an operating area. And then you've got 2 big decks operating in the Mediterranean. And then you've got hundreds of aircraft that have been flown into the region as well as into Europe. And if you look at the tanker activity, we've brought a lot of guns to this fight. Just on the flat tops alone, you're talking about 210 combat aircraft, and each carrier is configured differently. The Abraham Lincoln, which has been in theater for a while, is primarily configured with stealth aircraft, which you're going to use early on in a fight. And then the Gerald R. Ford is configured primarily with F-18s, which are going to be coming in after all of the electronics and aircraft defense systems have been disabled. So there's everything in the theater to do what the administration is threatening to do. But I think what I'm concerned about, what your audience is probably concerned about, well, what happens to us? Right? Can I talk about that?
No, yeah, I'd like to. What do you think the most likely? Do you think they'll take that off ramp? Does that sound like that's a plausible? Okay.
I mean, look, if Trump takes that off ramp, his ego is bigger and his naivete is bigger than I ever, in my darkest nightmare, ever would have considered.
Okay, so we'll call that a 20% chance because that's always a real thing. No, I'm exaggerating. And when you said flat top a number of times, I'm taking it from context to mean those are aircraft carriers because they have the flat top, and as opposed to all the bristly things I see on all the other ships that are involved.
Correct.
Okay, probabilities of likely outcomes from what you have available to you today in whatever terms you want to discuss them. I'd love to hear.
So I know from my time in the intelligence sphere, and I'm not giving anything away classified here, is the Iranians have compromised every piece of critical infrastructure across the internet throughout the entire region other than Israel.
Okay.
So what they would do, this is why you're getting a lot of the Arab countries who have no love for the Persians and the Shias, not allowing the U.S. to use their countries to operate from, because the Iranians can attack the U.S. by attacking, kind of like we were talking about earlier with China, by attacking those Sunni Arab countries and pulling down their electrical grid, their water purification and distribution systems. And that would put pressure on the United States. They can also close the Straits of Hormuz for a limited period of time. And that would put pressure economically on the entire globe to put pressure then onto the United States to call this off. So this is what we call an asymmetric response. The Iranians are never going to build a fleet. They're never going to develop the aircraft or the technology to meet the United States head to head and then win that fight. So they're going to fight it asymmetrically. We've seen them operating here, in the cyber realm, throughout my time at the FBI. Again, nothing there classified. It's been covered in the press. And then we were told during both administrations, the Biden administration and the Trump administration, by Wray, Patel, Hegseth, Mayorkas, Tulsi Gabbard, and others of note, that the Iranians have managed to put across our border hundreds, if not thousands, of operatives that have snuck into the country. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just repeating what they've said.
Yeah, we've heard a bunch of this
Right.
and we had open borders, which is one of the big scary things.
But
It's
then
not
the
just that people
question
come in and run up rent, right?
Do these people become dead enders, saying like, well, if the regime's going down, I'm going down with them? Or it's like, screw it, I actually learned to like bacon cheeseburgers. I'm just going to hang out here and go with the flow. This ain't bad.
Okay, let me dig in on that just for 1 second, because George, one of the first things that you and I did during the first interview I ever remember, you gave me this insight into national security and the change that happened over 9/11. And I'll just give people a quick, short version of it. Essentially, there was a definition of national security. It meant preserving the Constitution, protecting America from outside threats, blah, 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 making sure that we still had the rule of law in our country. And then after 9/11, it was nobody dies from terrorism. And all the things that came along with it. And one of my suppositions that's come along as kind of a corollary to that thesis that you have is that we had to go after what are called homegrown violent extremists, and that they dried up as well. Homegrown violent extremist people, there's like international terrorism. So those are overseas people with overseas ideas, and they come to the United States and they cause problems, which would be kind of what we're talking about here. Then there's HVEs, and those are people that are raised in America and they get jaded and pissed off. And so they associate with an overseas ideology, and we run out of them too because there's not that ton of them, because America kind of radicalizes people. They may become bacon cheeseburger nationalists. You came to the United States looking to serve the regime, and then you look over and you go, by the way, they're probably all going to get nuked. They're all going to get toasted. There's a bunch of F-35s off the coast right now. If the United States wants to turn my old country into glass, and by the way, my country set me up with like a name and an address and a job and a means of making a living. And there's pretty girls here and everybody's pretty free and the internet's available. Like Uber Eats exists and there's a Costco and maybe it doesn't suck that bad to be here. And we end up radicalizing them with just the freedom of the culture. even as flawed as we are. Is that how likely do you think that is? Do we have any studies on that when it came from looking into potential terrorists infiltrating the United States and then seeing that they kind of gave up on the mission?
There have been some think tanks have done work on that, but sadly, what they found is that Muslim immigrants who have came to this country legally, it's their children that have become radicalized.
That's the HVE problem.
Yeah, and so I haven't seen any study of a known intelligence operative that has come to this country and said, this isn't bad. I kind of like this. I haven't seen, other than the Babylon Bee, I think they did a couple pieces on it, and I mean that sincerely.
Yeah.
But no, I haven't seen any studies on it, and it is the big unanswered question: are you going to have your dead enders? Kind of like the Saddam's core. I can't remember.
Yeah, what was it? It
wasn't Fatah al-Islam. It was
the Republican National Guard or whatever the hell they were called.
Yeah, but it was another element. I think it began with an F. I can't think of the name of it. Probably somebody in your chat knows. But
just like a kamikaze mentality.
Yeah, I'm going down with the ship here, baby. I'm a true believer.
Yeah.
I'm going to secure my place in heaven and go down with the ship, and so that's an unanswered question. And then the other unanswered question is what is the level of penetration that the Iranians have from a cyber standpoint, and will the Chinese help them? Because as we talked about just a few minutes ago, the Chinese have a lot at stake here.
Right.
And one of the nice things about cyber warfare is deniability. So there's a tremendous risk here to the country and disruption in our way of life if we go into Iran, up to and including American death, not on U.S. soil. I'm not saying that to be scary or hyperbolic. Yeah. I'm just saying that there is risk here to doing this. This is not like going in and snatching Maduro. This is not like going in and taking out Saddam Hussein. This is not the same at all. This is much more risky of an operation.
Let's put it in priorities for people who have not worked in that space. But there are basically countries that we worry about, and then there's countries that we do not worry about. And the two spheres that I'm aware, we're going to talk about counterintelligence. So that's going to be the espionage world and trying to subvert and using sort of tools of shady statecraft kind of stuff. And then there's the counterterrorism, where you're going to use asymmetric warfare and you're going to send people in that have bad ideas to hurt the country kinetically. And unless I'm mistaken, Iran is a threat on both of those, and it's in the top, 5. Is that?
They are. Yes. Yep.
You got the Chinese, we got the Russians, we've got the Iranians, we've got the North7 Who are the other ones in the big? Like, is there one more in the
Russians,
big 5?
Chinese, North Koreans, and Iran are the top.
So that's your big 4. And they all have kind of different characteristics. I remember people describing them to me as saying, like, one group is kind of like a cat burglar. The Russians are kind of cat burglar. They have that Soviet post, Cold War era where they had all these incredible tools, and their entire mechanism was sent towards being sneaky. And we were all doing that. We were trying to, I'm not touching you, but I'm taking things from you kind of thing. The soft touch. And then they had the Chinese, where they would just come in and they just vacuum up the whole house. So they would literally just come in with a house mover and take your whole home, and you go, oh shit, I think my house is gone. And then they had kind of like the Iranians were like drunken burglars, where they would like break in and touch a bunch of stuff and take things that were not as valuable as they should have been, but they were still a threat. They would still come into your home and do this kind of stuff. Is that pretty close? That
hasn't changed, and I can't remember which year it was, but a few years ago, probably more than 5, the North Koreans sent a satellite directly over top of the stadium that the Super Bowl was being played in.
Oh, really?
It got no coverage. And what that was is a message saying that we have mastered telemetry to the point where if we want to put a nuclear warhead on you somewhere in the United States, that we can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a lot of risk associated with what the Trump administration is about to embark on.
So these were always described to me in kind of terms of like how it would affect, like if the United States was your home and you lived there, like what kind of criminal threat would it look like in the nation state world? And I think the North Koreans were described as like, if they were just mad at you, they would just drive their freaking car and park it in your living room. They would just like jump off the ramp of your steps and just end there. And they'd just be like, here we are. Yeah. And the results may be catastrophic for us, but like we don't care.
Right.
And that's dropping up, putting a satellite over your head and just saying
Yeah,
that.
no, I'm deeply concerned about what the Iranian response is. And, when we look at our ports, so my first mobilization after 9/11 was looking at, doing boardings at sea with the Coast Guard and doing port security, not walking around carrying a rifle, but, doing like interviews and climbing all around ships and looking at container handling. Our ports have been mostly focused on intercepting nuclear weapons or nuclear material coming in. But often overlooked is something called a Club K, which is a 40-foot shipping container with either missiles or drones loaded in it. So we saw where the Chinese have been purchasing land adjacent to military bases. What's the satellite imagery on that? Are there any shipping containers, sitting in a field adjacent to a base somewhere that we should be taking a look at? Again, this is not just about Iran. This is about Iran and China and that axis between those two countries. And I don't think we're looking at it from a whole. Hopefully, we are. Because Tulsi Gabbard doesn't have to brief me, but hopefully, they're looking at it from across the entire spectrum.
All right, I'm going to get your prediction in 1 second. I'll just remind people, if you're watching right now, we appreciate you guys watching. So give us a thumbs up on Rumble and on YouTube. Follow George. He's at Senior Chief EXW SENIOR. Am I spelling that right, George? CHIEFEXW for Expeditionary Warfare. Follow him on X. One of the great follows that probably people are missing out on. If you guys are listening and you're not seeing any of this stuff, you're missing out on George's candlesticks and his sword. You're missing out on some of the videos and some of the pictures that we show you. Follow us over at KyleSeraphin.com on Spotify. You guys may hear a Spotify ad as we monetize the platform. I appreciate all of you subscribing there, and leave us a 5-star review on Apple. Give us a comment on those places where it is necessary. I'm kind of flippant about it. I hate plugging things in the middle of it, but it's kind of necessary because I know that when someone says it to me and I'm watching a video, George, I'll be like, oh, I should subscribe to this channel. Like, I do it all the time. And then I'm like, I know better. I do this for a living, and I still forget that stuff. So, okay, prediction time. Do you think the United States does some form of kinetic strike? Do you have an idea of how far that might go? And then what are the most likely branching consequences? Sorry, that's a long question.
I think it's above 90% that we're going to go for a regime change. I'm sorry, I'm shading that based on bias. We're going to strike Iran. We should go for a regime change because that's not going to solve the problem. That's if one ascribes that we should or should not strike Iran. We're going to strike Iran.
How confident are you that we will?
Missiles and nukes, or they go for regime change, I think remains to be seen.
Okay.
The consequences across the Sunni Arab world and the United States could be deadly, as we covered before, both via cyber means or kinetic means. And it's an unanswered question. I do know for a fact that the Iranians have good penetration into the cyber networks across the region. So it's a very risky adventure that we're embarking upon here. It's going to happen.
What do you think the biggest risks are to your average American person, the bacon cheeseburger nationalist, who maybe doesn't care all that much about war, not really that psyched about it, and took Donald Trump at his word and promised number 8 of the Agenda 47, prevent World War III, restore peace. They're like, yeah, that all sounds good. Iron Dome, we don't have that going. What's the risk to average person hanging out at home listening to this? And we can talk about mitigation after that, I suppose.
Biggest risk, low probability of likelihood, is a loss of infrastructure, electric and water.
Mm-hmm.
Very low likelihood that would be on a large scale.
But if the Chinese got involved, that would be something they could definitely play with, right? It could
definitely be something that happen. And if it can't be done via cyber means, it could be done via kinetic means. A couple guys with high-powered rifles or explosives who understand how the power grid works. It could happen. So high risk, low probability.
Just for people's awareness too. 1 sec, George, too. The other thing is, people, if you haven't listened to the program before this, the Chinese have sent people over for many years, and I'm sure other countries did. I just didn't focus on them. but they send people in to scout out our infrastructure. And Americans are so excited about the cool stuff that we've done in our counties that if you're a Chinese national citizen coming in with a university pedigree and you've got an ID from some local school that brought you in because another Chinese professor works there, they'll show you where the water treatment is. They'll show you where the electrical grid is. They'll show you, what systems we're using. And with just a little bit of sophistication, you can find out how it's run, what access it has to networks, where the penetration points are for a human being to come in and disrupt this stuff. Like, we're so wildly exposed in this country, and we put a lot of that stuff online and make it available to anybody. So all this stuff is very realistic. So again, that depends on whether or not the Chinese get involved. I'm sure the Iranians have done some of it. They can't have nearly the capabilities China does. But if Chinese are willing to weigh in and just say, hey, let's make things a little bit more spicy for the Americans back home, they could very easily do some rolling blackouts or water shortages in places, or turning off pumping stations or whatever else they wanted to do, especially in the national capital region.
Chinese national security is at stake here. President Xi has been pretty much almost under house arrest since July. Their government is on the verge of collapse. There have been riots over food. Their housing market has collapsed. So China is in bad shape right now. So a regime change in Iran could very result in a collapse in the Chinese government. So the risk here is substantial. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. We need to look at this more from just an Iranian standpoint. This is not a Maduro takedown. This is not Iraq 2003. This is something on the geopolitical stage that spans the entire globe. So I would say higher probability of disruption of critical infrastructure here in the United States on a regional basis. Maybe your city, your county, moving down the scale to lower probability, your entire state. But if we see a state go down from electricity standpoint, electrical systems can cause a cascading event, and it could then quickly blossom into a region. So say if New York City went down, New York State,
just the overflow from demand trying to be balanced out across other grids could cause other grids to be unstable or fall.
And the communist prime minister of Canada just invited Chinese troops into Canada to help defend Canada. So I don't know what that's all about.
Well, okay. Let's get broader then too, because we've talked about the probability, which you think is high, that we are going to go do a strike of some kind to some degree. And I want to play some things because a lot of the chat is over here. I'll give you a chat. I see what you guys are saying. You guys are saying it's not about China, it's about Israel. I'm gonna listen to George on this thing here, but I'll give him a chance to balance that out with some other people's statements. Before we do it, George, what about the risk to not striking? Like, what's the danger of America going like, you know what, Iran sucks, but they can't reach out and touch me right now. And if we don't put we've got carriers there, but we could pull them back. We don't need to do this, or do we? Is there a requirement that the United States act right now on this front?
No, because I think China's so vulnerable right now that we could take a pass on Iran, and
we could wait it out and just see how the Chinese fare from their own domestic problems, and maybe they collapse under their own weight.
We could help them along with their own demise, which would be less consequential here to folks in the United States.
Wasn't that essentially the Cold War end? It was like we outspent them, but we didn't go to directly fight them, and the Soviets fell apart under their own weight. We didn't have to go engage them. Yeah,
so we could handle the Chinese with a little bit of help. We don't have to take down the Iranians to do it. I just pointed out that it is a real easy three-legged stool to kick over to take down the Chinese, and what the effect it would have on China. And I don't deny what your chat is saying, that this is about Israel, because if we don't take down Iran, then they continue to be a problem for Israel.
So let me play the two pieces that I played yesterday. One is Ted Cruz, who is famously pro-Israel when it comes, and said some pretty weird things that don't make any sense to me regarding Israel, this sort of evangelical position. We'll play that, and then we'll do the counterpoint, which I played yesterday as well, which I thought was very well worded. And then I want your weigh in on both of them. So stand by for one. Here is Texas Senator Ted Cruz.
I think that's exactly right. We are at an extraordinary moment in history. It is entirely possible, Sean, that in the next 6 months, we will see the regimes fall in Iran, in Venezuela, and in Cuba. And we could also see governments replace them that want to be friends with the United States of America. Now, let me be clear. I'm not being Pollyannish about this. There are 1,000 things that can go wrong. But if that happens, this would be the most consequential geopolitical shift since the fall of the Berlin Wall, since America won the Cold War without firing a shot. I spoke with President Trump the day before yesterday, and we talked in particular about Iran. And I said, this moment, the regime is teetering. The Ayatollah is in his last days. And I said, do not let this opportunity pass. We have
All right, so you've got him making the argument that we should go to war for regime change. So that's Ted Cruz. Here's the counterpoint we played yesterday that came off the Piers Morgan show, and the argument is that this is not a good move for the U.S. It's an Israeli move. So here you go.
But the idea that a country like Iran, which is no threat to the United States, or a country like Venezuela, which is no
Iran
threat
is
to the
no
United
threat to the United States.
No, it's not. Why is it a threat to the United States?
Well, maybe because the Ayatollah has repeatedly threatened the United States publicly.
He can repeatedly threaten the United States till he's blue in the face. Who cares? The question is, does he have the military capability to do harm to us?
Well, they've had the military capability.
In fact, if it wasn't for the...
Well, what they have done, they funneled a huge amount of money into propping up terrorist organizations all around the Middle East, all of whom are wedded to the obliteration of Israel, which is America's main ally in the region, and has a lot of interest, mutual interests. Now, you may not like it, but that's the reality. And so, yes, they represent a threat to one of America's main allies and to Americans who live in Israel, for example, to American service people who work with Israelis. Of course they do.
But you're making the argument that they're not a threat to the United States, they're a threat to Israel. And because we're joined at the hip with Israel, anything that's a threat to Israel is a threat to the United States.
All right, so that's essentially the argument that was being made. That's the counterpoint. So you got one guy who's clearly against Israel's involvement in the U.S. He wrote an entire book about it, in the Israeli lobby, and he wrote it in 2007. So this is a long position. Ted Cruz, famously in exact opposite camp. What do you make of the arguments made for either of these guys?
Ted Cruz said two things that both can't be true at the same time. He said he wasn't being a Pollyanna, and he is being a Pollyanna.
Okay.
And because in the same breath, he turned around and said, a number of things could happen. So, yeah, he's right. A number of bad things could happen. You know, earlier in your show, we talked about Trump trying to develop the American hemisphere from the Arctic Circle down to the Antarctic.
Sure.
Iran is a nuisance to the United States. They're not a threat. But they are a nuisance. They're a manageable nuisance. They are a threat to Israel. They're a minimum threat to some of the other Sunni Arab states. I think one of the concerns is, and it's a legitimate concern, and I didn't hear either person bring it up, is that if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, then the Saudis get a nuclear weapon. And I don't want nuclear weapons spreading around the globe. I mean, we're in a bad situation already with Pakistan having a number of nukes, the Indians having nukes, the Indians, by the way, who believe in reincarnation. So I don't think anybody who believes in reincarnation should have nukes.
That's a good point.
And then the United Kingdom is on the verge of becoming an Islamic state, which is a member of the Five Eye community.
Right.
And they have nuclear weapons. So, put me down as being, for not spreading nuclear weapons capability around the globe. So there is an argument to be made there that Iranian capability would spread to other countries in the Middle East, and it would probably result in an Israeli preemptive nuclear strike on Iran. So can I just say a kind of a bad word here on your podcast? It's
you can say anything you want, George. I don't care.
There's a scene out of Full Metal Jacket. And the captain, I think it was, turned to Joker during the Tet Offensive and said, "It's a huge shit sandwich, Joker, and we're all going to have to take a bite."
Yeah.
That's the unfortunate situation that we're in. There is no easy out to this. There are ways that we can maybe do this with a little bit less risk, but a nuclear Iran results in a nuclear Saudi Arabia. A nuclear Saudi Arabia results maybe in preemptive strikes from somebody. The Muslim world hasn't shown themselves throughout history to be all that pragmatic and unwilling to engage in violence to solve their issues. Now, granted, the Europeans have been, crazy during 2 world wars and a number of other wars on the European continents. But I'm sorry, I just don't want the Islamic world going nuclear. I just don't see a good outcome there. Shoot, lost my train of thought. Where
That's okay. Well, no, and this just underlies like sort of the complicated situation. It's like, well, if it's about China, and if that's the strategic purpose, then maybe you let it happen and see what happens with China because they're in a bad spot and they've got difficulty. If it's about Iran specifically, it's kind of not a great play because, like, who cares? Iran is a nuisance, is kind of what you just said here. So in and of itself, it doesn't represent a salient threat to the United States. And yet, if you look at downstream consequences of an ongoing nuclear program, that argument sounds like it holds more water to you because it ends up causing proliferation and it ends up with a regional capability of some countries that probably shouldn't have it and cultures that we don't necessarily think are aligned with our value system and can't be trusted in general. So, and then the last thing you said was the thing about Five Eyes, which I'll go and key in on. Any thoughts on those? Kind of, did I sum it up more or less and bring it back to where we were at?
No, very tersely, 100%. Love it.
Okay, so here's the question, because this gets brought up all the time, and you've got what, 26 years military intelligence?
Yeah,
is that right?
26.
And what about civilian agencies?
Not as many, about 17.
Okay, and some of those are overlapping, obviously.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, I'm not that old. I look that old, but no.
Guys, if you've never seen George, my father, who is famously very kind about a lot of things, he goes, I love George, but he looks like a burn victim sometimes. And I was like, yeah, he washes himself out with the lights, but like, that's just George. That's just, the man he's weathered something. That being said, George is super fit for what? How old are you?
67.
We may have to talk about, do you eat any like cancer-ridden foods? Like, do you eat Roundup crops and bread from white bread companies and stuff?
I try to eat as healthy as possible. I've had guys ask me in the gym, like, oh, what do you do for your abs? I'm like, I'm not doing it here. I do it in the kitchen.
That's right.
Turns out you cannot exercise away fat.
No, you can't.
And some advice for your guy audience, if you have love handles, you'll never get rid of them. The only way is to hide them, and you do that by building a bigger back. So bench more.
I need to bench more. That's what needs to happen. Yeah, I've got some love handles. I'm not afraid to admit it. I also ran a sub 7-minute mile times 2 the other day. So, nice. So be it. Okay. All that is to say, you've got a lot of credentials in that field as far as time spent in this game. You've seen intelligence investigations, counterintelligence investigations. You've watched the sort of the world interplay for quite a while, and you worked at the Bureau for what, 11 years doing counterintelligence?
Yep, just under 12. Yep.
Okay. You hear a lot of talk from people that don't have any credentials in that field say Israel's our greatest ally. I see it said all the time. I believe that to be a ridiculously weird statement, considering we have greatest allies. They have a name, and the name is Five Eyes, which you brought up earlier, even if one of them turns into a Muslim state at some point soon. How do people in the counterintelligence and the intelligence space view Israel as a partner, friend, ally, enemy of the United States? If you could summarize that for people.
In the intelligence sphere, Israel is viewed as no different than somebody who just walks through the door and says, hey, can you tell me this? You're going to have to look at what the downside risk is. Is there any upside to them knowing this? How can they help us? They're basically a walk-in. Like if you were a CIA intel operations officer and you had somebody come, walk in to the embassy where you're working, that's how you treat them. To call them a frenemy is too kind.
Okay.
Frenemy is, for your audience who doesn't know what that is, it's a combination of friend and an enemy. I know during the Mumbai attack, I worked very closely with RAW, which is the Indian intelligence services, and we had to do a lot of machinations for intelligence sharing with them. It's no different than with the Israelis. There's some benefit to be had, but there's tremendous downside risk as well, because they're doing what we thought the Trump administration was going to do, which is America first, and Israel, it's Israel first.
Yeah, all that kind of checks out as far as whatever. Now, there's I'm going to find this. Hold on here. Let me put me back on the screen here while I find this. George, there was this discussion that popped out in the context of the Epstein administration or the Epstein files dropping. You want to give your general summary of what you think Epstein represented maybe to the American psyche, but then what he actually materially represented as far as a either intelligence threat, a pedophile or whatever. What do you think was going on versus what people actually believe it to be, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I said to you and Steve Friend, I believe that Epstein was an intelligence asset for probably more than just one intelligence service. Ghislaine Maxwell's father worked for British intelligence, and that's kind of how he entered into our national psyche through that vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
I think where it resides in the American mind is that he is the physical manifestation, or was the physical manifestation, of a two-tiered justice system, that there are certain individuals in the world that can do whatever the hell they want, and there are no consequences for it. And our political class refuses to understand just how destructive that is to good social order and civilized society.
All right, I've got Mike Benn's breakdown, which I think is really interesting, and I want your read on this as well. Mike always strikes me as a really sharp guy. He's obviously a pretty clear-headed thinker on a lot of this stuff. And here he is talking about the calculation of like why there's such an issue there. And we're going to tie this back to this sort of frenemy, frenemy is too nice, this Israel connection. There was some news that dropped yesterday that I didn't cover, and I wanted to go on there. And then I had a conversation with a mutual friend of ours, retired FBI agent, who had a really interesting perspective coming from the cynical place that only a retired FBI guy can have. And so I want to hit that and kind of see what you think about it. First of all, Mike Benn's on the Epstein file release and sort of the miscalculation politically on why this is like sticking around.
I do think that there was a miscalculation about this, and the staying power of the Epstein story is going to eventually force more concessions as it already has through this bill. I think about this. Nobody wanted to be the Thomas Massie who has their whole career thrown up in the air, getting primaried in hit pieces and, disavowed, and then Marjorie Taylor Greene feeling like she had to drop out of Congress altogether over this. Nobody wanted to be the one to sponsor the bill, but nobody wanted to be the one to go against it once it was already sponsored. So you had this situation where everybody feared the higher power centers of the party to not sponsor that bill. But once the bill was sponsored and live to be voted on, everybody feared the base, that if they voted against it, they'd be voted out and it'd be held over their heads forever. And so the mere act of sponsoring the bill put the establishment in a bind. They would normally, obey donors or obey, top-down directives. But once the bill was live and they had to answer forever how they voted on that bill, they were put to a point, in 427-1, it passed in the House and 99-0 in the Senate. So nobody was willing to bring it, but then once it was brought, nobody was willing to oppose it. The same thing can be done with all of this. I think that this is one of these moments where if you can use that same strategy, you could do that in theory, not just for the CIA and State Department files around Epstein. Who's going to vote against CIA declassification of around COVID-19? All records, responsive to bioweapons research, the CIA, ODNI, DIA, NSA, all of that. Do it with Fast and Furious. Do it with Seth Rich laptop. I'm inspired by what Thomas Massie has done, and given that they've already pulled. That's right. It's easy from the crowd to say this. I know this. I'm sure that when Thomas Massie walks back to his car at night or something, he wonders, okay, like, did I say too much today? But the fact is he's just opened the door to a very revealing phenomenon, which is that.
I'm going to cut away from it right there. What do you think about that?
I have mixed feelings on that. It's almost as if we have to blackmail our own elected representatives to behave in a responsible manner.
That's the phenomenon that Mike is pointing out there with his last couple words that we just played. And I mean, I think he's right. I mean, do you think that analysis is correct? That basically we've found a thing that if somebody breaks through the door, then the mob and the base and the general American, which I think is to the right of both political parties, is like, can we just have freaking sanity? Like, you can't be that. Everybody votes for pedophiles get hung. Everybody votes for evil people pay for their crimes. Everybody votes for the rich don't get a second tier of justice. It seems to me that's what Massie accidentally revealed. Even for people who don't like Massie, you kind of have to look at that and go, that's pretty sane.
Yeah, we have to continue down this path. I would agree with that. When it was pretty much became undeniable, even to the conservative sphere, that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, I started tracking, just anecdotally, the trust in institutions and in government, and it's been trending down at a precipitous rate ever since then. And then Epstein came along and just accelerated that rate of decline. And again, you can't have a functioning civilized society where people don't trust in their institutions, don't believe that their elected representatives are going to do the right thing, that people are not going to be held accountable. Just look at the outrage that occurred in Mogadishu, in Minneapolis. So it's, hopefully we have reached a point where people realize that accountability is a good way to start to get some improvement in our lives. But we'll have to see how it goes. I heard that Sick Bunny or whatever was on at the Super Bowl halftime show. I mean,
I don't know what's wrong. Any man that names himself Bunny anything is that's not a dude that I know anything about. I had people reach out and they're like, "Hey, what did you think of the Super Bowl halftime show?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't watch grown men play sports. It's not my thing." Okay. We have this moment though where we have kind of revealed this phenomenon where if somebody were to open the question, like nobody should ask the question. You can't say that. But if you do, there's enough pressure that you know that you won't be able to survive a re-election campaign if you don't back it. Hence, this is the Tom Massie. That's why I think Massie's getting so much crap from everybody. He did the thing you're not allowed to do. He questioned he asked the question that no one's allowed to do. What files do you have? What did you have? And what does it look like? And the more that it trickles out, the more damning it looks. And I'm going to bring up our conversation I had yesterday, get your take on it. First, this story came from Dropsite News. It's being reported in other places as well. This is stuff coming out of the Epstein files specifically. So here's the headline. The Israeli government installed and maintained a security system at Epstein's apartment. The security equipment and alarms were installed by the Israeli government at the notorious Manhattan residence. I actually have some video or some pictures of the residence, which I'll show you. It actually was a beautiful apartment. And also there's some rooms in there that are 100% like Israeli flag colors. They're just blue and white. And maybe he just really loved teacup blue and white. I know my wife and I have that for our dishes, but it's really nice looking, but it looks really kind of specific. Anyway, there's a claim that Epstein had nothing to do with Israel. I'm going to play you that as well, because I want you to hear some of the Trump's former ambassador to Israel making this claim that Epstein may have been ethnically Jewish, but he didn't like Israel and he wasn't a Jew, which is bizarre. It's a bizarre claim. And maybe he didn't keep kosher or anything like that. I'm sure he didn't, but so this is kind of the thing. This is the Dropsite News author that wrote this piece going on with Megyn Kelly. This is kind of I didn't know this. Maybe you already knew this. This goes to that access point and this sort of Israeli intelligence connection, among others.
The Israeli permanent mission at the UN was responsible for security at Jeffrey Epstein's apartment. That's according. Yes, so that's according to emails that we found in the files. So.
I have been reliably told that you are an anti-Semite if you look at all into Jeffrey Epstein's connections to Ehud Barak or Israel, Ryan. So you just tread carefully.
So what's probably going on here? So this is related to Ehud Barak staying for such long extended periods of time in his apartment, which undercuts Ehud Barak's previous argument that I barely know the guy, I have no relationship with him. He was staying so much in the apartment that the Israelis literally took over security for the apartment. So the maids and any guests that went in and out of the apartment had to go through background checks and had to be confirmed and coordinated with the Israeli consulate at the UN. And at one point,
all the time, or just when Ehud Barak was there?
It seems like all the time, because there's the handler, this guy named Rafi, who's in the emails. He turns over and you see Barak's wife. He's like, all of a sudden she's getting texted by another Israeli official, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I have the file now. Let me know who's going in and who's going out. We're
What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, just because a person can be an intelligence asset, it doesn't have to be solely owned by one country, though.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So he could be working for the Israelis, he could be working for the U.S., he could be working for the Aussies, the Brits. It doesn't matter. He was a broker. He was probably not just an operative for various countries, but also an access agent as well. Probably motivated by, and again, I'm just guessing. I've never sat down with Jeffrey Epstein,
sure.
But probably motivated solely by the basics: sex and money and power. There's nothing to indicate that he was an ideologue in any aspect.
George, is so funny because I had those exact same three. The fourth thing that people bring up is patriotism, which is why they might operate. But the other ones, sex, money, power, those are the real ones that exist. The patriotism thing basically doesn't exist in any meaningful
and people
way.
try to ascribe some sort of patriotic element to somebody like Jeffrey Epstein. Look, there's a great scene in the movie Airplane, I think Airplane 2, where the guy just goes ballistic on the flight attendant, and the inner monologue of his wife sitting next to him, she's like, I've been serving Dad decaf. Maybe he's just an asshole. I mean, that should always be in your thought process, that maybe some people are just driven by basic, the deadly sins, and some people are just a-holes. And
100%. Okay, let's dig into the conversation I had yesterday with someone who will remain nameless for a little bit now, but I want to ping your brain against it. The three elements of recruitment are sex, money, power. That's what gets people involved in doing certain things for you. You offer them sex, you offer them money, you offer them access, power, etc., and what those things bring. And so, power can be influence and some other things. So these are like recruitment tools. Is that a fair assessment of what
Yep.
Okay. Recruitment tools are those three things. If Israel has an asset on the ground in New York City that is as prominent a person and in prominent circles as Jeffrey Epstein, there is zero possibility the FBI doesn't know what he's doing or have him as a known target and someone to be following in the counterintelligence sphere. Yes?
100%.
And that was in New York City. It was also in New Mexico, but apparently his big residence, where it would have been run out of, would have been New York City. And would it be fair to say that the New York City office of the FBI and the counterintelligence program there is probably the single most important? Washington Field would fight over it, but at the end of the day, I think New York City gets more prominent cases.
Yeah. So sex, money, and power. New York City has two of those three.
Got it.
Sex and money.
And they've got the access to the UN, which means at least you have some international access to people who are power brokers.
Right.
Okay, so that being the case, Israeli intelligence or Israeli security apparatus are involved in doing security. This is also being reported by Al Jazeera. So it's good to read alternative press to find this stuff, but this is one of them. Israel installed the security apparatus at the Epstein Manhattan apartment for the ex-prime minister, blah, blah, blah. There's a very solid connection. We just told you that there's zero chance that you have the Israelis putting physical surveillance and technical surveillance and security apparatus into an apartment without the FBI being aware of it. There's no chance of that happening. The other thing is there's no chance the CIA is not going to be aware of this sort of thing because they're also monitoring this stuff. But the CIA's ability to operate domestically is at least somewhat limited, ostensibly limited. Is that fair? That there's always like this sort of wink and nod, there's a nudge. They do try to play sometimes with whether it be NR or whatever else.
Oh, no, I've worked with NR, and you left out one other player in the game. The NSA would have been collecting on any foreign people that were interacting with Epstein as well.
Okay, so we've got American intelligence has to be involved. If you want to have a physical arm of it, then you're probably going to be playing with the FBI and CIA and NSA. NSA has a strong domestic capability to do that. CIA has a foreign interest, but they're going to have a domestic presence with what's called National Resource. Is it National Resource Group? Is that what they call it?
Yeah, NR, yeah.
I always hear it called NR, but I've never heard it. Like maybe it's NRG.
They usually just NR. I've never heard the group followed after.
I was like, it's National Resource. Is it National Resources? Anyway, folks, they have a Wikipedia page. You can go look up the CIA's domestic wing, but they also play really nicely with the FBI. And in fact, there's a collaborative, cooperative agreement with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This is something that I've told people, and it always blows their mind, but it's overt. The FBI sends special agents that are working as special agents with a badge and a gun the way that I used to over to the CIA. And I know some of them, they're not bad people because they did this. A lot of them are great people. And they go and they train as a case officer. And then they use the case officer type recruitment skills that you would have to go pick up a foreign asset or an asset agent that George was talking about. And they do it domestically. And so they're allowed to do it because they are the FBI. And so you have this weird sort of hybrid space where FBI agent wearing a CIA hat at the time kind of gives up the badge and gun law enforcement game and goes and does human intelligence and becomes like a collector. And they're collecting assets for the FBI, but also for the CIA at that time. So there is this major interchange that happens. That's why we talk about this being a community. I'm not real crazy about the FBI being involved in it, but I would make the argument because of that. First of all, do you disagree with any of those things?
No, it's 100% right. But the FBI, though, will use its domestic law enforcement authorities while operating as a CIA case officer, though.
100%, which is the big danger that I think that this podcast continues to point out for people that don't understand what that is. So, all right, I just wanted to fact check that. All of that is to say, when we start talking about a Jeffrey Epstein, when we start talking about someone that is in that space, when we start talking about the fact that Israel clearly had involvement and was physically involved and had, surveillance systems or whatever it was for security, that automatically loops in the domestic capabilities of our intel agencies, CIA, NSA, and then the law enforcement / intel agency of the FBI. And very specifically, it does so in New York City, which I would also argue might be the most corrupt of the FBI's CI field offices, based on the fact that Charlie McGonigal is in prison for it at this point, based on the fact that Andy McCabe came out of that office, based on the fact that we've seen significant numbers of what I would say is at least morally compromised people from the CI background come out of the New York field office and then end up at the top of the FBI. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the evidence certainly points in that direction, and we do not have a robust internal counterintelligence program. We have the SecD, the security group, but they don't operate, say, as like CIA would in terms of on a regular basis ferreting out internal leaks and people that are compromised.
And what's amazing is
rely on just the polygraph process and
which they're behind on. Do you know that the woman who did the Epstein file redactions, the one who ran that program through Information Management Division, is Shannon Perry, and Shannon Perry also used to run that insider threat program, which theoretically ferrets out the potential spies and traitors within the ranks of the FBI?
Yeah, that insider threat program is relatively new, and that came about mostly because of political concerns, not so much for national security concerns.
Yeah, they came after people like me.
They were looking for political purity, ideological purity.
Yeah, if you were more outspoken about the way that you thought about the why instead of just the what you said, if you were less terse and a little bit more chatty, then you would have been a target for the insider threat program because your ideology, it's too fair-minded for what they want. They want bureau loyalty. I'm just making a statement about that. That's Kyle's opinion, and I think that it's also been borne out to be factually true for pretty much everybody who's been on the other end of it. So here's where all of that leads. Israel doing security loops in our intelligence agencies to include the FBI. The FBI had the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. Those investigative files, as we're seeing through the Epstein files, were pushed out, came out of New York. Remember, that was the original sin that Pam Bondi, I had the files on my desk. Guess what? They're being held at the Southern District of New York. The Southern District of New York is the United States Attorney's Office, and it works with the FBI's New York field office. The New York field office is a hotbed of sketchy people. At the very minimum, they are the most powerful in CI, and they would 100% know what was going on in their own backyard with people that were of high prominence like Jeffrey Epstein. Here's my last connection I want you to see if you agree with me on. When you become a senior executive in the FBI, you're making $225,000, maybe $260,000 a year, something like that. And the number one goal that I've seen of these people is to increase their prominence, to increase their power base and their sort of number of programs they've touched. And all of that is to aid them getting a post-FBI retirement gig that pays them 3, 4, 5x what they were making when they were at the FBI so they can cash in on that experience. Is that accurate in your experience?
Yeah, and all we have to do is go to the LinkedIn page and you could plot it out, on a straight line. That's
knowing
exactly
that somebody who has 5 years worth of investigative experience is now in charge of the counterintelligence program or the whatever for some high level intel, what do you call it? Intel company. So a Google, a Meta, a Facebook, an X,
well,
all
how
that kind of
quickly
stuff.
we forgot that Silicon Valley, there was a series of articles done. I don't know if Schellenberger or anybody did anything on it. How the Silicon Valley was populated with all ex-spooks.
100%. And so when we say spooks, like we're talking not just CIA or NSA guys, but also former FBI counter intel people. Yep. They're in the same category.
Yep.
All right. So here's the argument I'm making. I'm restating it over and over again, folks. I'm adding a piece of the block, and then I'm telling you the whole thing from. Israel is involved. We physically know that they were involved in security based on multiple reporting stories coming out of these Epstein files. So they were on site at Epstein's place in New York. That immediately loops in domestic security, and it loops in domestic intelligence, CIA, NSA, FBI, probably other entities that are underneath ODNI. That's Tulsi Gabbard's. Once that happens, we can start looking specifically into George and I's former Bo and the agency that we spent some time at. And the things that we know about it are very specific. One, the New York field office has people that have been corruptible. They've also been ideological actors, and those people tend to be very self-centered. They're interested in the same things: money, power, and sex. In fact, we see sexual malfeasance as a pretty common thing in FBI senior executives. We see that money and the potential of being bribed, and Charlie McGonigal being a great example, but I can't say that there aren't others because they don't get looked at. There's some whistleblower reporting on that. And then lastly, the idea of power or influence or being able to go on and make big money. Now, here's where it gets really dark for me. The same field office that was involved in handling the Epstein case has also been the one that was very reticent early on, starting in March of last year, that they didn't want to release these files, and that they were the ones that were being kind of the log jam when it came to releasing them, even when there was an active investigation. And the supposition that my retired friend made yesterday was all of these people are probably dirtied up on it, that there are probably emails or ECs at high levels that are going to be beyond the average person in the FBI being able to see, hidden in restricted files that authorize all kinds of shady shit. And if it means compromising someone because we were going to sacrifice, some 16-year-old girl who's a runaway and she wants to become a prostitute, then they're not going to stand in the way of that, because these people are trying to get the same thing that everybody else is trying to get, which is information and access, and they're doing it for the greater good or national security. But all of those people are likely dirtied up in there, was his statement, that the FBI is probably not giving people the files because it is absolutely damning to the FBI, as well as it would be to any other intel agency. What do you say about that thought? Is that a too far a jump, maybe?
No, it's not too far of a jump, but let me just shorten it up just a little bit, taking it back to what you were talking about, trying to make senior executive to get the six-figure job. One of the ways to shorten that path or make sure that you're on the right path to the really good job is, you're working counterintelligence in New York, and, you're come across Epstein in some professional way, and, not an unfriendly encounter. And he's like, oh, I know, so-and-so over at National Grid or Duke Power and Light or whatever, who's looking for a security manager or executive. And now all of a sudden, now you're on the way to being compromised. Again, sex, money, and power. So we're talking about money and power here. And so, that's just who Epstein was. He said, he's not a patriot. He's just a sleazebag. So anybody who came in contact with him could have very easily have been compromised, because he had access. Jeffrey Epstein, being the access agent, had access to other individuals who would love to have a former FBI senior executive on their board, on their executive board somewhere.
Yeah, and if you're trading in sort of access and this sort of like name recognition, all this other stuff, anyway, that all that rings true. So that's very simply put. And yeah, it kind of put me into a much darker spot yesterday thinking about that. We're going to go a little bit further down this rabbit hole and some of the things that are the consequences of what Massie did, which many of you guys may not like, but there's a reason why people are mad at Tom Massie, and they should not be mad at Tom Massie. You don't have to like Tom Massie at all. I happen to. I think Tom Massie is very principled, and in my discussions with him on the back end, he's smarter and he's sarcastic in the way I am. So sometimes people read stuff he says and they're like, "Can you believe he said that?" I'm like, he's effing with these people, because he's looking at dummies and they're asking dumb questions. So he's saying things that are funny. Some of the downstream consequences may be really crazy. And so anyway, I'm showing you some pictures from inside Epstein's mansion, which was 21,000 square feet. That apartment was 21,000 square feet. Most of your houses could fit in there multiple times. Probably, like, I think mine could fit in there like, 10 times close to, something like that. All right, real quickly, if you guys are still watching, one, I appreciate it. Two, make sure you have subscribed. Like us on Rumble, like us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, easiest place to find it, KyleSeraphinShow.com. We'll play a Spotify ad real quick here. I try to keep them like 30 minutes spaced out so you guys get tons of content before you go back to any of this stuff. Let's do this. Did you know that they're opening up a look into Epstein's ranch that was in New Mexico?
Why hasn't that already been done?
Great question. Also my question, why was it closed? And this is, again, the overwhelming reason why we've got a problem with this FBI. I don't know who briefed it, George, but somebody told the guys that are running the Bureau at the time that you can close this investigation and you're still going to be good. And I don't know if that was like good guys on the inside trying to get something out, or if that was like bad guys on the inside knowing that they were going to just discredit the living hell out of these two men that were at the top, and Todd Blanche as well. But the minute you close down that investigation, you no longer have the top cover of we're dealing with an ongoing investigation. And then you open yourself up to being exposed. Here's the story that's happening out of this is ABC News talking about New Mexico has reopened its investigation of the Jeffrey Epstein Zorro Ranch. They had a prior investigation. It was closed in 2019. The FBI's obviously closed last year in July. Nobody really knows why. Like, I've seen a lot of people saying there might be something shady there, but nobody knows what that shady thing is and what the compromise might be. And now we're like 5-6 years after the fact. So I don't know what you're going to go find there. Like, people think they're going to find like, buried bodies or something like that. Maybe. It seems unlikely to me that you're going to find physical evidence there. This seems like theatrical because they blew it. Like, why the hell did they close the investigation in the first place? That confuses the living hell out of me. Anyway, there's some signs from it. You have any thoughts about why the hell they would have shut this thing down?
I don't know. I was on with Nick Giordano at the PAS report last week talking about why the FBI shut down the investigation in the original biolab that they found 3 years ago. I don't know why the FBI does the things that it does, closing things out like that should be explored and pushed out and pushed out and pushed out that there's no further to go.
Yeah, as a logical thinker, there's not to make a case, you'd want to keep it open. So that leads me down some really dark rabbit holes where it's like, well, they must have closed it because they are going to expose the wrong person that they've been told they can. And those are real things. Like, whether people think it or not, Maine Justice will reach down and say, hey, nice case you have there. It's done. And the FBI headquarters can do the same thing. Like, we're discontinuing this investigation. There are no more resources or your time authorized to it.
They did the same thing going back and looking at Whitewater. They put that case out in Utah, gave it to a U.S. attorney out there. I spoke with the SIA out there. That was ongoing. They were recruiting people to come out and help. And they got a little bit too close to the flame and they shut it down.
Now, people may not remember this, but there was credible information at the time, and we weren't able to substantiate it. But I had people reach out to me from the Miami field office saying that in the West Palm Beach RA of the FBI, that they had conclusive evidence that Joe Biden's brother was selling access to U.S. citizenship and like basically skipping the line. Kind of like Trump's gold card, but instead of being $1 million, you could get citizenship for $50,000 if you gave it to the president's brother, and he would make the red tape go away. That was the allegation that was being made. And the United States attorney apparently had some pretty good evidence on tape that this was the case. They had a confidential human informant they're working on. I'm getting this all secondhand, so I'm just kind of reporting it to you guys as I heard it. And then the crazy part is that the other piece that happened is that Joe Biden's DOJ came in and said, you're done. So the local United States attorney's office was willing to pursue. And we got this, this DOJ Maine coming out of Washington, D.C. that said, absolutely not. There's no budget for this. There's no time for this. You are no longer authorized to continue working this. And that's when those cases go to die. And I had similar stories being told about Chinese issues that were happening in Texas, in West Texas, where they had credible, capable, prosecutable counterintelligence threats, which are, George can tell you, they're not all that common. You get a good prosecutable CI case. And that might be a once in every couple of years for some squads. Like, it's just, they'll spend years trying to build enough evidence to bring a criminal prosecution. And they were told absolutely not. They couldn't go forward with them.
We've been talking about this for 30 minutes now. Two-tiered justice system. It's dangerous.
And I do think that we've seen what that mechanism is. So love him or hate him, be mad at him or not, looking at what Thomas Massie accidentally, or maybe intentionally, I don't know if he knew it was going to go there. I suspect he probably didn't. Because how do you know how people are going to react? You can't make this thing go away because all the rails that it touches, it just offends the sensibilities of sensible, regular people, a.k.a. my bacon cheeseburger nationalist types. Look at this, George. I got a mug rocking right now. What do you think of that?
I saw that. Nice.
Yeah, it's a nice looking mug. My buddy Donut Patrol over on X sent that to me. I have to get them made. He's like, I'm not stealing your IP, but I am making you a custom mug. So I have a couple custom mugs I get to drink out of. All right. I want people to chew on that, see what they think about it. And then leave us a comment. Honestly, if you guys have some other thoughts, there are people out there in our audience that have like a lot of experience as well in different fields that are going to overlap ours, or they're going to be completely, beneficial for us to hear about it. So put a comment in. If you know some other connection that I'm missing out on, I want to hear it. If you have another guest that's going to be able to tell us more about that, great. I just know, George, I could pick up the phone on a at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night and say, hey, Steve Friend just told me that he doesn't love me anymore. Will you show up and hang out with me? And he does. So George, tell people where they can follow you if you would. And if you have any closing thoughts that we missed out on, I'd love it if you gave them. And let's wrap this sucker up.
Yeah, Senior Chief EXW on Twitter. That's all I'm going to give out. I do hang out on Instagram, and but under a different moniker, and it's strictly
it's just for the bikini pics over there
sort of stuff. But yeah, that's about it. Closing thought is that what we're about to embark upon here with Iran is being taken too cavalierly by many. Because we've been lulled into a false sense that this is going to be quick and sanitary. And I would just, urge probably not this audience, but other people to dial down their enthusiasm a little bit and, and say a prayer.
It's a good sober thought on a Friday as we're in Lent right now. I may play a couple other clips after I let you go, George. I appreciate you hanging out with me as long as you did. I hope we didn't cut dramatically into your workout time, and then hopefully all the weird things that are floating around from the carpet being done get filtered out. Maybe you can open all your windows up and
it's freezing here, bro. We're getting another foot of snow.
Do you know it's 90 degrees here? So like
no, it's not.
I swear to God, yesterday it was 90 degrees when I got in the car. And so like my ability to like see what's going on with other people, I was walking around barefoot and I sent a picture over to Garrett. I go, hey man, it's really gross down here in Texas. And he sent me a picture of like snow banks in his front yard. And I was like, oh, other people get winter. It's so strange when you don't get winter that you're not connected to like a huge chunk of America. So George and I have this weird disconnect where it's going to be hot outside. I can walk out right now in Ranger panties and no shirt and I will still get a sweat on if I
Thanks
walk around.
for that image. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Just 2 layers of mesh between me and the rest of the universe. That's what I want. Wow. That's all that would be between you and me when you walk outside, George. That's
okay. I'm glad we're separated by 1,500 miles.
It's a lot of air and just 2 layers of mesh. That's all I'm saying. Buddy, thanks for hanging out with me. I very much appreciate it. Folks, you should follow George and have a great weekend if I don't talk to you anytime sooner, George.
Thanks. I'm just going to listen in.
Okay, good deal. Come back and tell me more when you know more things too. So there you go. George Hill, one of our favorite people to have on here. One of the incidental contacts of me starting this podcast, for whatever it's worth. Like the reason I know George is because George found out about the stuff that I was doing and we had a mutual contact. My Quantico roommate of all people worked next to George, and terse would have been a very nice way of describing it. He said he's a straight shooter. You guys will find that when you look at him. He's not an emotional man about this kind of stuff. This is very analytical. So I very much like that. I want to play you guys a couple other clips of weird things that I saw because I don't know. Like after seeing the Megyn Kelly clip, I kind of had some other strange questions. There's been this attempt to say that if you're mad about what Epstein represented, that you're anti-Semitic. So there was this claim. It's weird because I just showed you, and I think there's ample evidence that's both in the files and also sort of in the common discussion right now that Epstein had this connection to at least the former prime minister of Israel, and that Israel provided physical security and technical security for his home. So how do you end up with a Trump administration official making the claim that Epstein, that you're both anti-Semitic if you are talking about Israel in connection with him, and you're not talking about facts because he hated Israel? It's totally logical to me. Anyway, we're dealing with this time where we have to suss out a lot of crazy stuff. So here's one of the crazy things.
Anti-Semitism is, it's always kind of lurking underneath, and you need sometimes events over the years, pull it out. Like, when Captain Dreyfus was accused of treason in France, and Theodore Herzl was watching, all of a sudden, kill Dreyfus, kill all the Jews. Yeah, where kill all the Jews come from? All of a sudden, from one guy. So we have, we have our Dreyfus today. We have the war. We have Jeffrey Epstein, who, by the way, hated Israel. Had nothing. There was nothing about him that was Jewish. Didn't observe Judaism. Didn't practice Judaism. By the way, I thought of this the other day. I just, if you don't mind me jumping in on this,
please.
Everybody says, when people say, you can be anti-Zionist without being anti-Semitic. They say, look, Judaism is just a religion. It's not a nationality. So, we're not against the religion. We're just against the nation. It shouldn't be considered a nation. Okay, that's very interesting. Jeffrey Epstein, right? He's not a Jew. He's not a Jew under that standard because there's nothing about him that identifies with Israel. I think one of his emails says, I hate Israel, right? There's nothing about him that is religious at all. He doesn't.
The Israeli permanent mission at the UN was responsible for security at Jeffrey Epstein's apartment. That's according. Yes, so that's according to email.
So you guys can go back and watch that clip again, but there's some things that are at strange odds. And when people make statements that don't seem to have a lot of backing behind them and they're pushing an agenda that I don't really understand, that makes me ask a lot more questions about more like, well, what is your angle there? And why would you say things that are clearly not accurate? And why are you picking and choosing sort of these sort of silly little ways of trying to craft the argument? And it's going to a low information group of people. We can broadly think about it. Some of the stuff he said was obviously true. And yet you can't make the claim that he like hated Israel, but he also let them like run security in his house, or maybe he hated them because they were running security and he's an access agent. So he's working on behalf of intel agencies, and he started hating working on behalf of intel agencies because nobody wants to be run by somebody. Everybody wants to think that they are the puppet master. Nobody likes to think they're the puppet. Being a puppet probably sucks, especially if you're a smart guy and you have a lot of power and wealth and money. So anyway, there's this simplicity. And then the other version of the simplicity is what I saw the other day. There's a clip that came out from the Charlie Kirk show, which they're still running under his name, which is a little bit weird. I think it's a little bit sad. And these guys are trying to say, just because you don't know what's going on doesn't mean like good things aren't happening. Well, that's what the memo that happened last year was. The last year memo in July of 2025 said that the FBI and the DOJ were done with this stuff. The only thing they're doing right now is cover up redactions, and maybe they're not doing them according to federal law. That seems why. I think we presented a compelling case, at least one reason possible why the FBI is not giving you what you should have and what you're entitled to under federal law, because our lawmakers all voted for it. As Mike Benz pointed out, a huge number of people realized that Americans, generally speaking, want accountability. They want actual transparency, and so it needs to happen. So it's kind of an interesting thing to see that as well. Here's just because you don't see it happening, it's not happening. This is the same bullshit that we got slung by Kash Patel and by Dan Bongino.
But listen, there are things happening in the background at the DOJ that we just need to keep our eyes on. And we need to sort of say, listen, the wheels of justice turn slowly sometimes, but they are happening, okay? And again, I would mention the name Reid Hoffman. You've seen this just this morning that Bill Gates has dropped out of a speaking engagement due to increased scrutiny over the Epstein files. Kathy Rumler has stepped down at Goldman Sachs because of her connections to Jeffrey Epstein. And it was worth mentioning that she was Obama's longest-serving White House counsel. So the DOJ's release of these documents...
The DOJ was forced to release those documents to give DOJ credit for something that they didn't want to do and that the FBI didn't want to do, and has basically done obstruction every single time as long as they could. All of these things are the evidence that what these guys are saying in this kind of slop narrative is that they're full of shit. And they're all running cover for an organization that they don't deserve any credit for it. The DOJ and FBI don't deserve credit. Likely is the most likely story. And after talking yesterday, I went like, oh yeah, they are in fact part of this problem and maybe are even implicated in it, which doesn't seem even that implausible. And you just listen to George, and George is a lot more sober voice than I am sometimes, right? So let's consider that. And then you get this weird piece where people are telling me things that I know are biblically not true, that are cherry picking and have never been taught in mainline Christianity for like 1900 years. But we're getting the Glenn Becks coming out and saying certain things. We're getting Trump's ambassador to Israel and Mike Huckabee, who seems like a really nice man, and he interviewed my buddies, and got no animosity towards him. I've got Dinesh D'Souza now out there making these same claims, and all of these people seem to have one specific purpose, and it is also using sort of cherry pick facts. We're not going to actually give you the entire context. We're going to tell you that you have to support Israel. Ted Cruz makes this exact same argument. I think the argument made at this podcast is like, I'm not anti-Israel. I don't really give a shit. I'm whatever's the best for America. And if that means that we should strike Iran, great. Just make the argument to me and then I'll hear it. I think we made some arguments why it might be dangerous, why you might not need to do it. There's some arguments why you might need to, but they're not being said. So let's have sanity about like, what are your principles? What is the MO that you are trying to, what is the actionable outcome that you're trying to achieve? Don't tell me that I have a biblical necessity to do it. And here's Mike Huckabee saying, this stuff is hard to listen to.
I had a Jewish friend from New York ask me one time, we were in Israel together, and he said, why is it that evangelical Christians are so supportive of the Jewish people and of Israel? And I said, it's quite frankly pretty easy. I said, you can be Jewish and have nothing whatsoever to do with Christians, but I can't be a Christian and not have everything to do with the Jewish people, the Jewish faith, the scriptures. Everything I believe is built on the foundation of that. So for me, and most evangelicals would say the same thing, we're people of the book. It's simple. So if you read in Genesis that God blesses those who bless Israel and curse those who curse Israel, this gets pretty easy.
I don't know where these people are hearing this or what church is teaching it, but it does make me grossed out. And it definitely does, like, it divides, because you're now coming straight out of Genesis. Like, there wasn't the first book. That was the opening argument at a time. And then if you're a Christian, you actually believe that there's 2,000 years between even the time that Christ walked the earth. So it's just really strange to see this kind of stuff. And to make that, we had a really good call in from one of our regular listeners who goes by the amusing moniker Tack Penis. He and I served in the Air Force at the same time in the same place, so I know him personally as well. And I think he's exactly right. There's plenty of scripture that can easily contradict this sort of evangelical cherry picking, but it is specifically evangelicals in America. And if you're in that category of people, I'm not mad at you. I'm just saying that that's wrong. It's just it's not Christianity as it's ever been taught, and it is a very, very new concept, to the point where the Orthodox Church doesn't think that, the Catholic Church doesn't think that, and if you have a Protestant denomination that you follow in, you came from 1,500 years of tradition and history and scripture, and none of them ever taught this thing. And also Israel's like since 1948, so like you're making some really strange stuff out there. Let me tell you why I think this all matters and what the consequences are while all this stuff is going on, and we're getting the kind of like the effery that is happening in the federal government not getting out transparency as they should. The other side is making their plans. They're watching that Americans are pissed. They're going to take advantage of this distracted moment, and it is going to be absolutely dangerous and probably fatal for some people. They will turn around and weaponize government. When I tell you that I think that our next president is going to, probably imprison Kash Patel, and that Donald Trump has a real possibility of not just getting impeached, but maybe even dying in prison, because these people don't miss. They've been working on it. Here's Susan Rice saying it. I'm just saying, there are going to be consequences. They're saying it overtly.
But when it comes to the elites, the corporate interests, the law firms, the universities, the media, I agree with you, Preet. It is not. It's not going to end well for them. For those that decided that it was, that they would act in their perceived very narrow self-interest, which I would underscore is very short-term self-interest, and take a knee to Trump. I think they're now starting to realize, wait a minute, this is not popular. Trump is not popular. What he is doing, whether on the economy and affordability or on immigration now, is not popular. And that there is likely to be a swing in the other direction. And they are going to be caught with more than their pants down. They're going to be held accountable by those who come in opposition to Trump and win at the ballot box. And I can tell you, Preet, as I talk to leaders in Washington, leaders in our party, leaders in the states, if these corporations think that the Democrats, when they come back in power, are going to, play by the old rules, and say, oh, never mind, we'll forgive you for all the people you've fired, all the policies and principles you've violated, all, the laws you've skirted. I think they've got another thing coming, because, just like when Trump thought, okay, I'll redistrict and the Democrats won't have the guts to play hardball, they're going to be surprised. Democrats have had a belly full, and we're not going to play by the old set of rules when these guys are playing by a very different set of rules. We're going to play by.
They're telling you right now. I mean, there's multiple people out there messaging this exact same thing. Guys, follow us on Spotify. Share this show with a friend. Feel free to cut any piece you want out of it. KyleSeraphinShow.com. You can join us at Locals if you want to be part of the community that discusses it. You can be a free member. You can be a paid member. KyleSeraphin.com to go there. Wherever you're at, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you've liked it up. Make sure you share it with a friend. Make sure that you have a second place to find us, because sometimes we have weird things happen. Like our show goes down in the middle of the show yesterday when we started talking about certain things that were adversarial to this current regime, which I don't think is doing the right thing, but not because I'm mad about what they promised. I'm just mad about their poor delivery. I do have some palate cleansers for you as we walk in. The palate cleanse, if you guys don't know what this is, it's a foodie thing where you've eaten something and then you drink some water and maybe some like bread, and you take that down and you clear off whatever was on your tongue so you can get a new fresh taste. So I don't want everyone to go off in doom and gloom. This was a little bit of a heavy show. So let's laugh about a couple things. Some of us could use a cheat code right now. If we are living in a simulation, whoever's like running your avatar sucks.
I don't sound like a conspiracy theorist, but the whole thing about us living in a simulation, whoever picked me as their video game character need to step it the fuck up, all right? I got no money, I got no career, my nose is stuffy, the weather sucks. Put in some fucking cheat codes, man. Goddamn.
Some of you guys are fed up and you're frustrated, and I understand where that comes from. So that's what it looks like. All right, one last little thing. Since we talked a little bit about the Bible, we talked a little bit about Genesis, acting like somehow the world is going to be perfect or everything is going to work out great. That's kind of not how it all started, and it probably doesn't end up that way either. So here's a little funny take on the way that man started. I understand that, at least the way I believe it, Genesis is not literal fact necessarily. It's apocryphal writing. That being said, this is a very funny way of looking at it literally. When someone kind of breaks down that the nature of human beings and the nature of the world is fallen in a comical way. So enjoy this a bit.
People think the world's gone to hell, that it's gotten so violent. But the world never got violent. There is no got. The world has been violent since the beginning. Cain killed Abel, man. Cain killed Abel. The third person on the planet killed the fourth person on the planet. We weren't even able to make it to 3 people before somebody was a murderer. At one time, a third of the people on the planet were murderers, right? A third of the people in the hood aren't murderers. A third of the people who own guns aren't murderers. A third of the people in jail aren't even murderers, right? San Quentin, Alcatraz, Folsom Prison are safer than the book of Genesis. You thought Compton and Baghdad were tough? Try downtown Eden when the sun goes down. There was murder and violence at person 3. One couple had 2 boys who had the world to themselves, and one of them was claiming this town ain't big enough for the 2 of us, right? Cain killed 25% of the world's population. That's more than Stalin, Hitler, Idi Amin, Pol Pot, King Herod, Genghis Khan, Manifest Destiny, typhoid, cancer, AIDS, cooties, all combined. Cain killed a third of the people he knew. He knew 3 people. He killed one of them. If you knew Cain, you had a 66 2/3% chance of survival. There's no such thing as the good old days. There was like one good day. It was half a day. Adam and Eve were naked, alone in an oasis. Lunchtime came. People got hungry. Apples were eaten. Boom, Detroit.
That's the way my mind works too. I love it. All right, guys. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope that makes you laugh. I hope you can at least smile about some of this stuff. It's terrible, but also it's probably nice wherever you live, and your neighbors are still going to be decent people if they were yesterday, and they're still going to suck if they weren't. So there you go. Thanks for watching the show. See you guys on the other side of the weekend. God bless you.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram @Kyle Seraphin.